Recording. All right, welcome back, everyone. Today's class is going to be on Django associations and the Django server. So you have all been doing pretty fantastic, learning about Django ORM, models, validators, and the serializers so far. Today, we're going to step into the world of model associations and the Django server. And these are essentially very crucial blocks for creating our dynamic and interconnected APIs that can handle complex relationships. Right. So what are we trying to accomplish today? Let's pull up the README. Essentially, by the end of today's lesson, we will have the skills of creating associations between our models. So that's kind of the way of Django calls relationships. If you kind of remember PostgreSQL. So we'll look at how models can relate to one another using the Django's ORM. We're talking one-to-one, the many-to-one, and the many-to-many relationships. We're going to talk about the server, the Django server, in regards to the URL patterns and handling requests. And we'll get more into it deeper next, but you'll kind of start how that works and why we are doing this. I've got a lot of questions about like, oh, hey Roger, how does this kind of tie into our front end? You'll see a little bit of that today. Essentially, we're going to gain a deeper understanding of how the Django tie it all together, right? All right. So we are going to talk about Django associations, the Django server, and we can get and move forward. I am currently in my VS Code on today's lesson for lesson 3, associations and Django server. Let's go ahead and move into my demo folder that I have here. We are going to start off today by adding a new application. All right, so far, we only have our Pokemon app, and we are going to go and add a new app, which we will use for our associations lecture. Who can remind me how we create a new application?
You have to start by setting up a virtual environment.
Yeah, I mean, from the start, of course, right? I'm already in my virtual environment. Thank you for that, Jacob. Yeah, we do want to ensure that we are in our virtual environment. We are within our directory of our project, specifically where manage.py is. And we are going to use our Python manage.py to start an app, right? And this app is going to be called the Move app, right? Move. Well, why moves, Roger? Well, let's talk about the Poke API, which I'm sure you guys have probably already seen multiple times. Let's go to.
I'm so sick and tired of the Poke API.
I love it, man. I love it.
Me
but
too.
Yes, okay.
My cohort had the same conversation at the beginning of this lecture, the exact same conversation. Everything
Really?
was said, all the feelings. It's so funny.
I will never use the Poke API after this.
I will say, they introduced the Rick and Morty one, which is pretty cool. I think that was the first time I saw it from last cohort was where I saw it. That was new. We didn't use that one. Right. But with Pokemon, we have, what is moves. I don't know if all of you guys are all familiar with Pokemon. I know some people in other cohorts could not understand the concept of Pokemon. But let's go back to Ditto. All right, we go through Ditto. We have a specific section where we have moves. We have cries, forms, gain, indices. Right here, moves. All right, the different moves that our Pokemon has. Ditto has transform. Is that all you have, Ditto? Wow. Okay, let's go with someone a lot cooler that should have a lot better moves. All right. Charizard has moves. He has Mega Punch, Fire Punch, Thunder Punch, Scratch, and a large variety, right? what kind of relationship would you say that moves has with Pokemon?
Many to one.
Why do
One.
you think it's many to one, James?
Because it's many moves to one character or one Pokemon.
Sure, it does. But actually, the concept of moves in Pokemon is actually more of a many to many. Right? And this is only if you didn't grow with Pokemon, you probably don't know that. But essentially, many different Pokemon can have the exact same move, right? Charizard is not the only one that can learn something like Cut or Fly or Ring Attack, right? There are other type of Pokemon that could probably use that move too, right? So essentially, the type of relationship that many or that moves will have with our Pokemon is going to be a many to many relationship, right? This is the kind of things that you think about when looking into what your models are and how they relate to each other. We're gonna get our move app kind of set up and going before we actually start diving deep into the relationships. But I started my application after having a new app. What do I want to do, guys?
You have to add your move app to your settings.py.
Yeah, correct. Right. Our project is not aware that this application or I mean it is, but it can't talk to it, right? So we have to go into our installed apps and we want to add our new application. I'm gonna add it after Pokemon apps just so I can keep all my Pokemon stuff related together. It'll be move app. And now these are talking, right? They're having conversations, or at least they can. All right. So my Pokemon app has been created. Let's go ahead and move into the Pokemon, I'm sorry, the move app. And we're going to navigate to the models.py and we're going to create some models, right? So we're going to start with class and our class will be move, which inherits from models.model, right? On the Pokemon API, sorry, there's a pop-up here. Let me close it up. There's a belly fat pop-up, weight loss. Our moves, some things about moves. They have, for one, it's the name. I would like to go into a different version of moves. We can go into here, go to moves. Moves have elements, battle styles, categories. Not what I'm looking for. Here we go. All right, this is the type of field types that moves have. We have name. Obviously, we have the accuracy. So how accurate a move is. We see here that this APIs are very friendly. It tells us what type. If you're not familiar with Pokemon, the type of that field, it should be integer. PP for power points, right? The number of times this move can be used. We have power and so on and so forth. All right, we're gonna go through all of them or create all of them. We're gonna create a handful, just enough so we can get the concept. So we're gonna say name is equal to models dot models dot chart field, right? So the first thing we're gonna create is gonna be the name. We probably want to have a max length for this. I don't believe any move should be more than 50 characters. If it is, you're some kind of supervillain in anime show, saying this long attack. And it should not be blank. So blank equals to false. Blank, what does blank refer to when we put blank being false or true? And I asked this because I got this question asked a lot.
Does it mean that something has to be entered in there? Like it can't just be, it has to have like a value in there. It can't just be blank, right?
That's correct, right? It's talking about how we receive this kind of, if we were to receive information from like our front end, they're trying to create a new move. When they send in this request, like we can't receive blank input from the user. There has to be something in here. All right. So we will not accept like no value. Like we need something. All right. So that's essentially it's required, right? So blank is equal to false. We're gonna set no is equal to false. We don't want it to be no in our database. And we'll probably want to add a validator to this, which we will get to afterwards. We're going to add our accuracy, which should be what type? Integer. The curriculum does have a different field, which we can also use. You can probably guess what it does. Positive integer field, right? But essentially, integer field and positive integer field are very similar. Obviously, you know that it has to be a positive value if you use the other one. So we can stick to the curriculum. The default for our accuracy, we'll set it to 70. That's actually very accurate to Pokemon. Validators. And I want to add some validators to my accuracy. How do I add validators here? What do I need to import, guys?
Import validators. I forget like what the actual thing is though.
Sure. From Django.core. We don't really expect you guys to memorize all these. It's okay if you if you can create a cheat sheet, which I highly recommend. I did. Create an import cheat sheet of like, hey, this imports this, or where do I grab all these, this stuff from? It comes from here, right? So it's good to have, just kind of like on the side or in a notepad file on your computer. So when you guys are creating stuff, if you need to remember where something came from, just open up that file, right? Especially when you guys start working with your personal projects. If not, you're gonna have to go through the whole curriculum looking for what you're trying to use. So from Django.core, import validators. And it's a pretty long name, so I'm just going to give it an alias of V. And now I want to add this validator into accuracy. And the validator I want to add here is going to be a min and max value, right? We don't want our accuracy to go below a certain point or be too accurate, right? So we'll say V dot min value validator, and then the minimum will be 1. And then we'll add a max. So max value validator. And then this will be 100. All right, that takes care of accuracy. Next will be PP for PowerPoints. It's gonna be models dot positive integer field. All right, it shouldn't be negative. There's no such thing as negative within the Pokemon for PowerPoints. Our default is going to be set to 20, which is kind of accurate, especially for your basic moves. So we'll set our PowerPoint value to 20. And then we are also going to want to add validators into our PowerPoints. So we can do v dot min value validator, instead of that the minimum is 0 because it can reach 0 per the game. And then we'll do min value validator, or sorry, correction, max value validator. And then the max, I'll set it to 35. I believe it can go that high. I think if you use special items, but we'll just keep it at 35 for now. Right. And then the next one we're going to use is going to be power, right? How strong is the attack? So we'll say power is models dot positive integer field. A default power, I'll keep it to 70 as well. That's a pretty strong average attack. And then also have a validator for a max value. V dot max value validator, and we'll set it to 100. Now we'll set 120. Max power is 120. All right. So we have our move here. Do I have any questions about the class move and the fields that we use? All right. Notice we added default in here. So regardless if they give us feedback or not, we will always have something within our our move, right? So even if they don't give us how accurate they want it to be, or how many power points, by default, every single move will at least have these fields if they don't customize it, right? So we don't need blank equals to false, or no equal to false. We'll have something in there. All right, moving forward, let's also create a thunder method so we can see something within our move object when we call it.
Hey, Roger, you got questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Jacob's first on my screen. Yes, Jacob.
Yeah, sorry. I was just curious. I don't know if you mentioned it or not. I might have missed it. Is there a reason why you have a max validator for power but not a minimum validator?
Oh, no, that is no specific reason. I forgot it. It's not in the curriculum. That's why I forgot it, if I'm being completely transparent with you. But yeah, I mean, we can add a minimum in here. I believe there's attacks that actually weaken your damage.
Okay.
So we can add a min value validator, and let's set it to 10. We don't want them that weak, but that's gonna be up to you guys really. So when it comes to like what should be the minimum or max value, that's all in regards to the concept of what you are trying to create, right?
Yeah,
So
that's what I figured. All
yeah,
right,
no
cool.
problem.
Thank you.
No problem. I believe the other person was Sean. Am I correct?
I had the same question.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Thank you for that. Getting back to the Dunder method. So the Dunder method would change the response that we get when calling this object. And we are going to return a formatted string. It should give us the name so we can know what it is. We'll return accuracy as well. Honestly, we can return everything. Accuracy. And now let's just do power. We'll keep PP out. No, we'll do PP. Self.pp. And then self.power. All right, so whenever we try to print this out, we can kind of see what it is and whatnot. So here is our move. Now, we mentioned that we probably want to add some kind of validator to the name. And how would I go about doing that, guys? I want to customize exactly how I receive input for my name field.
Could you ask the question again?
Yeah. I have this name field within my move model, and I want to make sure that people aren't giving weird names with like numbers or, a super long name or, too short or just empty, just random stuff where there's a bunch of spaces between my names. Like, let's say someone creates like a flamethrower attack, right? They shouldn't be flame and then a bunch of spaces and then thrower, right? How would I go about that?
Just create a validators.py.
Yeah, you want to create validators.py. And we go ahead, come to our move app directory, and we'll say validator.py. So we'll create a customized file for this. What do I want to import for my validators?
The validation error from Django core exceptions.
Correct. From Django.core.exception, I want to import the validation error. That way, when my validator checks if it's a valid, input, if it's not, it should raise that error. And because it's a name, I'm going to import the regex module so I can create a regex formatted to what my name should be. And I'm going to say define validate move name. Right. This should take in a move name value. And then what's the first thing I want to do within my move name validator?
Create the error message.
Okay, yeah, create the error message. how should my validator work? Like, give me like a, you know, global scope concept. Like, it should do this in this matter to return this.
I mean, so starting from the top down, we would have an error message just saying whether or not it is a valid move name. The regex, I think, would just match the move name to what the Poke API. And if it's a valid name, then return it. Otherwise, raise the validation error.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. Correct. We're gonna want to create some form of regex that can catch the match for our move name, and then we should compare them against each other and see, hey, did this grab the entire name or not? If not, return this error, and if so, give me the name because therefore it's valid. All right, so that's what I was looking for. Thank you, Gary. So we're gonna create our regex, and this is gonna come straight out of the curriculum. As a matter of fact, we can take a slight 5-minute tactical pause and we can check out regex 101.
You got a hot mic, Jacob.
Oh, not bad.
Right? We can look at the regex and how that's working. All right, our move, we can say something like flame thrower. And I wonder if it'll work for me. There we go. It had the settings for it, right? So flamethrower. So what it's doing, right? It's saying at the start, I should be able to grab A through Z lowercase or capitalized, right? And it says that it should be between 1 or more times, right? So this should at least appear once or twice. We'll leave the option of a space here in case we want to create something like flamethrower, right? So they put a space and then they put a question mark right afterwards. Therefore, the reg is saying, hey, optional space, right? And then if it is an optional space, we have it where it can end up with A to Z as well, with 1 or more, right? And that's how it catches essentially our flamethrower. If you want to know more about the the actual explanation of it too, you can come here and it'll tell you what every single thing does. The caret asserts a position of, at the start of a line. So this is saying, at the start of your match, right? And this will break it down for you guys individually if you want to see how the regex works. Regex 101 is a great website. A through Z matches a single character in the range between A through Z in lowercase, and this one's for capital case, right? Notice it says index 97 and the index 122. It's referring to the ASCII values of these letters, right? So the ASCII value for lowercase a is 97, and the ASCII value for Z is 122. So that's how it's checking it, right? And then vice versa with the capital letter. The dollar sign at the end is telling it at the position of the end, right? So therefore, they should be at the end of the string to match it. Right. We have that space right here, matches the character, which is a space, right? And then the question mark is say 0 or 1 time or as many times as possible, ensuring pretty much saying it's optional, right? I know you guys talk about the regex and you guys wanted a class on it, so that's just how that is kind of done. So back to our validate move name, we have the regex. We're going to actually use the regex against our move. So we're going to say good name is equal to re.match. And then we grab the regex and test it against our move name. If this is successful, then the name should be saved into good name. And if not, then it should raise an error. So if good name, I want to return move name, right? If not, it should raise an error, right? So it should raise validation error, and just say improper formats. Do I have any questions on the validator move name? Yes, Jacob.
Just to recap, how does it know that the parameter being passed in move name is like the actual move name again?
This
Like
right
as
here?
far, yeah,
Yeah.
where's
Thank you for asking that question, right? So essentially the way that's going to work is we pass it into our name, it's
yeah,
given as a validator, right?
okay,
It's part of the validators itself, right?
okay,
All we do is pass in, let me import it from
oh, okay,
validators,
gotcha,
imports, validate move name, right? And we pass this in as one of the validators. It's a custom
gotcha.
made validator.
Gotcha. So you just didn't put that in there yet. That's why.
Yes.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah, no
cool.
problem.
Thank you.
It's
Yeah.
okay. Yes, Gary, I think I saw your hand raised for a second.
Yeah, I was gonna ask why we're not using the params in the validation error, like what that actually does.
Thank you. That's a good question. That's because the curriculum did not have it, but we definitely can, of course, right? So, we could do something like validation error. It would say error message, right? Because we created the error message. Oh, we did not create an error message. My apologies. Let's go ahead and create that. Error message is equal to, and let's call this improper move name format. I didn't do it because it's my job to teach you guys what the is based, you know. So I teach that, but we did do this yesterday. It was using a different part of the curriculum, so we can definitely go over it. We create the improper message that we want to have, right? Error message, and then we can pass it in here as an argument. And then we can also give it the parameters that we discussed yesterday. And we will give it move name as the key, and then pass in the value. So it depends what you want as a response. If I'm actually giving you like an answer for it, but this will give you a little bit more response of actually going for it, right? So it will return to you improper move name format. Do I have any questions? All right. To get back to what Jacob had asked, right? So how does our field know, what move name is? Well, we go back to our model. We import the validator from our .validators file. We want to import the specific move name. So validate move name. We come to the field. We add the validator into our list of validators. Now, do I have any questions about our move model, the fields, the validators that we added in the fields, or the validator that we created before we move forward?
Yeah, for the validators or whatever, in the validator section, you put move space name instead of move underscore name. Is that still going to work with the space instead of the underscore?
I'm sorry, where?
In validators, the params,
Yes.
move space name. Is that still going to work like that?
Yeah, I mean, it could be just name.
I think he's talking about in the raise.
The raise, move name.
Yeah, you have move on space name versus as the key.
That's
Yeah, right
just
there. Is that going to work still?
that's just for display purposes, isn't it? Like for like
Yeah.
the error, it's just gonna pop up and say the move name is this. It's just a string that's gonna display.
Correct. This is a
Oh,
string, right? It's
gotcha.
not an actual like variable.
Gotcha. Thank you.
No problem. All right, so we just created our move model. What's the next step Is this within our database?
No.
It is not. What do we want to do, Jacob?
I just knew it wasn't. Let's see. I don't remember
Make migrations.
exactly. Yeah, make migrations. There you go.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking for.
Good stuff. Yeah, so we want to come back to our terminal and we're going to use the manage.py make migrations. So we run make migrations. We see here that it created a model move. My migrations folder has been updated. We do have our initial.py file with our move and all the fields that we created. Now, is it in our database now, Jacob?
No, because you have to actually migrate it, don't you?
Correct. We have to migrate it, right? So we create that snapshot in record of what our migrations has, but we actually have to move it to our database. So we are going to say Python manage.py migrate. And actually, let me take a tactical pause real quick. I am going to actually drop my database real quick because I was messing with it earlier. I'm gonna get an issue here when I try and migrate it. Oh, I didn't. Oh, okay. Never mind. I was messing with it earlier, so I figured I was gonna get an issue with it. So apply to all migrations. No, cool. Well, actually, I'm just gonna go ahead and drop my database now because I have some other stuff in there. So drop DB, Pokédex DB. Let's go ahead and create it. And let's migrate Python manage.py migrate. Sorry, I was messing with it earlier and I don't want to get issues that might conflict with the lesson. So we have our migrations in there. Let's go ahead and come here. We're going to connect to the Pokédex DB. We can do /C and it shows us our tables. We have the Pokemon at Pokemon, and we now have our move at move as well as the ID sequence for tracking the incrementations of the keys or the IDs, right? Cool. Let's go ahead and navigate to our Python shell. We're going to go ahead and do Python manage.py. I'm going to say shell. I have the extension, so I'm using shell plus. I am not within the demo. Let me go ahead and open up my environment. And then run Python shell plus. All right, so we are in here. I do have the shell plus as discussed to you guys before. So it's importing all my models automatically, so I don't have to keep doing it every time I open up my shell. We have the move at models, import move. So we do have the move model in here. And let's go ahead and create a move real quick. So we are going to create, let's say, we'll say scratch, since it is one of the more basic moves. We're going to call our move model. And we see here that it takes in a name, which is going to be scratch. And as a matter of fact, let's actually break it real quick. Let's say 1. All right, we have defaults for accuracy, the PP, and the power, so I don't really have to do anything there. So we have scratch. We see what it shows. It's not saved into the database. But how do we check our validators against our move object that we just created?
Scratch dot full clean.
Correct, James. Right. To test out our validator, we want to call the object that we created and use the full clean method. And as we see here, it's going to return to me an error. And it says validation error, name improper move name format. That's telling me that my validate move name validator I created is working. Well, because within my name, I added a 1 in here and we didn't set it up to track digits. All right. So it's doing what it should be doing. We can go ahead and kind of edit that real quick. I'll say scratch dot name is equal to, I'll just call it scratch. I think scratch is one of the moves. Is it? Or am I thinking something else? It is, right?
I
Okay.
think so.
It is today.
It is today. Right on. Right. So I can go ahead and call scratch. Do full clean. And I get nothing back. No response is a good response. And we can save it. Right. After running the save, I can go ahead and select all from the move app move. And we see here, scratch is successfully in here now. I did drop my database, so I'm gonna go ahead and create a quick Pokemon because we already discussed the process of it. Name is equal to Pikachu. And then let's say level is 5. Pikachu is not defined. What do you mean Pikachu is not defined? Name Pikachu. Let's open up. What's going on with my app?
Do you have to have Pokemon before where you start naming name and level?
Name and level. Oh, I do. My apologies. I got tunnel vision to put Pikachu. You are absolutely correct. I did not call my actual Pokemon model class. So it wasn't sure what it was asking for. Full clean to ensure I didn't do anything wrong here. It does not yell at me. So we save it. Right. So we have Pikachu. And now we also have our move. Well, we have our move. We have validators and we have Pokemon. Now let's see. We are going to go ahead and create our test for move before we actually move into the association parts, right? So we added that new model that we were talking about, move. It's working. I can create, Pikachu in there. Let's actually create tests for it. So we're going to navigate to our move app underneath tests. And then here, what do I want to import within my test file?
From Django.test import test case.
It's
Wait, no,
already
you
in
have
here,
that, sorry.
Tristan. Good guess though.
Would we have to import the validator?
We're gonna want to import move, right? Because we want to test out our move model. So we'll do from dot models import move, right? And then we are going to create a test. And these are going to be very similar to how we tested out our Pokemon yesterday, as well as how we tested out the validator. So we are going to create a class. We'll call it moved test. And then it's going to inherit from the test case that's coming from Django. Right? Now, to create our first test, we're going to define test. It's going to be 0, 1. And I'm going to call it create move instance. All right. So within my test, what do I want to do? I probably want to create a move. And then I want to, ensure that it's created. And how do we ensure it's created? Or that it was done right.
Try with the full clean method.
Yeah, we're probably gonna want to use some form of a try and accept block. We'll probably want to use the full clean method to ensure that it was correct. That for one, it's good, right? That we can actually create it. It doesn't go against our validators that we created. And then if for whatever reason it does not work, then I should probably, if not clean, right? It should be self.fail, right? So we want to create a move. So we'll call this new move. We're going to use the move that we imported from our models. And this move will be called sidekick. And just as Demi said, we're going to use a try and accept block. Or in the try, we are going to attempt to run the full clean method. And in the event that it fails, erases the validation error. Accept validation error. Ooh, what did I forget here, guys?
Got to import.
Yeah, I forgot to import the validation error. Thank you. We're gonna say from Django.core.exceptions. I want to import the validation error. Right. This is why I recommend to you guys, like, make a cheat sheet where you have the imports for everything that you want to use. Because it's very easy to forget this. I know that when I first learned this, I was very overwhelmed with like all these different imports and what the imports were doing. And you'll feel even more overwhelmed once we get into views. Right, so we're going to try to run full clean on our new move. And in the event that it erases a validation error, I want to fail. So I'm going to say self.fail. Right, and then we could even, if we wanted to print like e.message dict, or we could just leave it as simple. And let's test it out real quick before we do anything else to it. Coming back to my terminal, I'm going to do Python manage.py test. And did you mean test? I did. And it looks like it's good to go. Do I have any questions on the creating a move instance?
Did it run the test that you just created, or did it run 3 tests that was in not student, Pokemon app? Because it's also running that test too, correct?
That's a good question. Well, James, we have another test file that you're aware of that we created yesterday. We opened that up. I have 2 tests in here, right? And this is the only 2 other tests that we have done. So that's within my Pokemon app, and I created a 3rd test within my Move app. So it said it found 3 tests in total, then it's referring to like the actual test that we, right? Not like test files. And it ran all 3 of those, and all 3 of them have passed.
Got it. Thanks.
No problem. Yes.
I'm just noticing when you imported like models import, we call the class moves plural, not move, but it actually still worked when you did this. So I'm just curious how that happened.
Could you say that again?
Line 2 from excuse me, from .models import move, but the class we made in models was moves with an S at the end, I thought. Oh, that was just me. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It happened. All right. We can refine this test, right? We can also add within the full clean method a assert is none. We can say self dot assert is not none. And what that's going to do is it's going to ensure that an actual object was created within our new move. And it's not just, the actual none. James, you're still raising your hand. Question? Oh, sorry. All right. So we want to ensure that the new move that we create is actually not none, right? So we pass in new move, it asserts the not none on it, and if it's not none, then start to go. Right? So that was trading a move instance. But let's actually try to see what happens if we do not create it right. And testing that it works, right? So essentially we're gonna want to test our validator. So we're gonna create a new test. It's gonna be test 02. And we are gonna call it create move with incorrect name, right? It's gonna take in self. Now, just like before, we're gonna want to create an instance of our new move. So we'll say new move, and it should use the move model. And for the name, I'm gonna deliberately try to break the model, right? So I'm gonna say wing attack, right? I can do something like that, where I add numbers in here when I know that it should not be numbers, right? Now, just like before, I'm going to do a try and except block, where I do one or the other, right? Depending on what happens within my blocks. And we are going to do new move dot full clean. I got fat fingers. I apologize. Full clean. Now, what should happen if full clean raises an error? And what should happen if it doesn't? Right? Well, if we are trying to ensure that that our validator that we created is running well, and if it doesn't actually catch this, then what does that tell us about our validator?
That it failed.
It's not
Failed.
doing its
That
job.
Correct. It's not doing its job. It might have been at some point, maybe in my validator, I might have not like written this correctly. And it's just returning like the move name every single time we're without actually checking if it works. So if it doesn't raise a validation error, then this test should fail. So we will deliberately make it fail at line 29. But the intent is to test the validator, so it should raise that validation error and it should come to block on line 30. Accept validation error as E. So if our validation error does catch this, then we have to test for that. So we say self dot assert true, right? And what we are going to assert is the error message that we get from the validation error, right? We call this improper move name formats. They should be improper name move format. Let me just copy and paste this. It should be improper move name format in e dot message dict, right? And within here, it should be in what key?
Move name.
Move name. Right? Do I have any questions about any of within this test before I run it? Actually, let's run it before we ask your questions. Let's make sure it actually works, right? So we'll come down here, Python max.py test, and we found an error. And that's within the move name formats. I guess it's looking for name. might have gotten this messed up. All right, okay, so let's go ahead and open up the validation error. It's probably looking specifically for name. Go to definition. Message error dict. Field name. It might be looking specifically for the keyword name. Guillermo, I see you lurking there. Do you know where in the code name is at for the validation error? Not Guillermo. I mean Francisco. I don't know why I said Guillermo. Okay, I'm assuming he's not there. All right, so the test, the e.message dict did not like the name, right? Where I said move name. I'm assuming the validation error is looking specifically for name, which kind of makes, I believe, who was it, Juan, that asked this question, correct. I don't think liking the params of name, or I'm sorry, move name, I think is looking for specifically the word name. But now we know. The more you know, right? We run it again.
Or maybe if you put that underscore under there, it might work.
It did. Did it not? You, James, thank you. I think you're right. Move name. And we are both wrong.
Somewhat. You just got to switch it for the message to move name, no?
Yeah, the message stick on the test itself, I think is looking for name. It does not like move name. Even though I added that within my validation, I don't think it's tracking it, and I wonder why when we put it as parameter. But I'll get back to you guys on that. But that's the test for create move with incorrect name. So we have our new model, which is move, right? We created so simple moves. We saw it work in the shell. We have validators, and then we even ran some tests on it. Do I have any questions on move? All right, before we move forward, real quick, we're gonna go over the serializers for move, right? So we have serializers for Pokemon, but we don't have one for move. What's the first step for that? What should we do?
Serializers.py.
Serializers.py, yeah, that's the easy first step. All right, let's go ahead and do new file. We'll say serializers.py. Excuse me. And where is our serializers coming from? Where are we importing that from? Do you guys remember?
From REST framework.
Awesome. It's from REST framework. So we're gonna say from REST framework, import serializers. And I'm trying to serialize the move model, so I'm gonna say from .models import move. And this is gonna be very similar to the Pokemon one, and we can even kind of open it up. Where's it at? Pokemon app serializers, open to the side. Right? It's gonna be fairly similar. Right? So it's gonna be class, move serializer, serializer dot model serializer. Right? We're going to inherit from the serializer model that we imported. It's going to have a class meta, and the model we are going to use is the move model. Now, fields. We can do the same thing that we did for Pokemon. There was another way of declaring fields in here. Do you guys remember?
Dunder all?
Correct. We can use Dunder all. And I think there's way of doing it, which is using the excludes, where instead of adding fields, you can do excludes, right? And then within here, you would add like what you want to exclude, which would be for, let's say power or PP, right? And then you would just put the field name that you want to exclude. This will return everything within your model except the power points. So now you have a third way of doing it, right? Let's keep it at all for now. Right, there's our serializer. And coming back to our shell.
You need to change your excludes back to fields.
Thank you very much. I did overlook that. Fields. Man, you're on it today, James. Buyers, specifically. You're on it. Good stuff. All right. We're gonna say exit. Python manage.py shell plus. And I'm going to import my serializers. So I'm gonna say from move app.serializers, import the move serializer. All right. So we have the move serializer. I'm gonna grab a move. So I'll say scratch is equal to. How do I query the moves from move? Not a trick question. I promise you. How do we query our database using the shell to grab a specific move or to grab moves in general?
You would do to instantiate or to grab it.
To grab it. All right, it's already, if it's in our database, it's been created, right? It's been instantiated. It's in our database. I'm trying to grab something from my database, so we have to query it. Yes, Gary.
So it's just going to be move.objects.get.
Moves.objects.get, correct?
What move equals scratch?
Close. Name, right? We can by its name or ID. If we wanted to grab everything by power, we'll do by power is equal to whatever, right? So I want to grab a move where the name is equal to scratch. And we can go ahead and call scratch. And we see here it's move scratch 70, 20, 70. I should probably really fix that Thunder method. But yeah, so it's in here. Well, let's go ahead and serialize it. Right? As right now, it's in what type of like format?
It's not JSON, it's a
Query set.
It's not exactly set. It is a query, right? It's a query an object that's coming from my database. A query set is closer to whenever we do like objects.all and we get a whole set of different queries. But you're on the right track, right? It is an object that we query out of our database, right? But no, it's not JSON, right? So by throwing this, this object, this query object into our serializer, it would be converting it to what?
A string?
A string, which well, no, not exactly. I think you're getting confused when we use the serialize without actually creating a serializer class. That's why we created the serializer class, right? But it would convert it into JSON, which we can use the .data method on it, and it will give us the data from it, right? So let's do that. See in action. We say serialize scratch. I'm gonna call it my move serializer and pass in the move, right? And I can call serialize scratch, and we see here, it's a bunch of different fields. But when we call serialize scratch data, we get like the actual JSON format for it.
All right, so the answer to that was data, serialized data was the answer.
it is serialized data. There's a specific name that Django calls it when it's done in the shell, but uh, it's essentially, a JSON type of data format. Does that make sense? Right? If it was coming to us from our front end, and I'll show you that example right now. If we did something like, request data, right? This data is coming from our front end. The whatever user put in some kind of request to add a new Pokemon to his Pokédex. It will look something like this, where we can say name and the name of his move that he's trying to add to his Pokemon. Let's call it Thunder Shock. That is the move, right? Or is it Thunderbolt that Pikachu uses?
It's either.
Okay, we'll say Thunder Shock. And then he's gonna take in level. And it's gonna, oh, it doesn't take in level, right? What does the move take? It takes accuracy default. We'll just keep it at name for now. Actually, no, we'll add another one just so you guys can see. We're gonna add accuracy. And the accuracy is 60. Right. This is coming from our front end, right? It's some kind of it's a JSON, right, object that they're putting in the request. It's coming from the body. We can't read it, right? Our database can't read it, right? Or Django can't read it like this. So we have to serialize it, right? So what we do is we do serialize move, right? Move serializer, and we add the data that's coming to us in a variable called data. So data is equal to request data. Right. We run that. And when we try to print move, oh, my bad. I haven't saved it yet, right? So it serialized it, but when it's coming to us and it's going through a serializer and it's unpackaging this data, it's not an object yet. Well, we have to run the isValid method. The isValid essentially is going to grab that data. It's going to run it against the model, its validators and constraints, right? Everything that move should be, and it's going to test that data. Hey, does this meet everything that it should meet in regards to my move object? If it does, then you're good to go. I'll return true, and you can now save it as an object. If not, then you can't save it, right? So the serialized move that we created, we have to run is valid. And we see here that true is returned to us. That means that everything that was brought in within this request is good to go, and I can now actually save it in my backend by using .save. And we see here Thundershock 60, 20, 70. Now, what if we get a bad request? Let's do that again. Right, but this time, let's say it's Flame, right? But they added a 0 instead of an O. Right? We go ahead and try to create a flamethrower object for our database. We'll say serialize flamethrower is equal to move serializer. We pass in that data that we have within our data parameter, right? We take that in, and then we test it to see if it's valid. And it gives us false, right? It tested that data that we got against our model and our everything that we have within the model itself, validators. It sees, hey, like this not meet what it should meet. The name has a number in here when it's supposed to be all strings per the validator that is assigned to the name, right? So it returns false and we can't save it, right? Does that make sense? All right, time is 10:06. Let's go ahead and take a quick 10-minute break before we actually start talking about the associations. All right, welcome back, everybody. So now that we created our Move app and added to our project, let's actually talk about associations, right? As mentioned before earlier in today's lesson, associations is the word that Django likes to use for relationships, right? So this shouldn't be new to you guys, but we're still going to be covering it as well, how to use it in Django, because Django does have different syntax for it. So the types of associations is the easiest one that you guys already know is going to be our one-to-one fields, right? Whereas in PostgreSQL, we use foreign key, we assigned it the foreign key that's within that table, right? And then we said references, we reference to a different table. We do that a little bit different in Django. We use, once again, the models, and then we give it a type field. And this type field is one-to-one field, right? Within the one-to-one field, it takes in a couple arguments. The very first argument that it will take will be the model that it should be sharing that relationship with. One-to-one being one person can belong to one passport, and one passport can only belong to one person, right? If we had two different tables, or two different models, right? We're using Django. If we have one model where it's a person and a different model is passport, on the passport model, there will be a field where it would have owner, and we would assign it models.one-to-one field with the first argument being traveler. Now, there are some other optional arguments that it takes, and we will discuss that as we go through the class. But this is essentially how you assign the relationship for a one-to-one within Django. One passport to one person, and one person to one passport. For the many-to-one associations, right? This is to the same scenario that we use in PostgreSQL. We also used, the luggage and people at an airport, right? You as a person, you're going to the airport and you're bringing multiple luggage with you, but those luggages don't belong to anybody else. They just belong to you, the one person, and you, the one person, have many luggages, right? Therefore, a one-to-many or many-to-one relationship. The way that we assign that in Django is by the models.foreign key, right? This is the only one that uses the foreign key. Don't think that the one-to-one will use foreign key. I know for PostgreSQL, it was kind of like every single one of them used foreign key. For Django, it's just the many-to-one. Right, we call the foreign key type, and then the argument that it takes, once again, just like the one-to-one field, is the model that it's sharing that relationship with. Right, so one person can have multiple luggages at this airport, but all these luggages only belong to one person, not anybody else. Do I have any questions about one-to-one or many-to-one?
Can I see the slide one more time for the one-to-one, please?
Of course. These methods can also be found within your curriculum with some small examples, which we will cover throughout the lesson. All right, moving on. And the third and last association is going to be our many-to-many fields, right? Back to the scenario of the airport. This time we're using the aircraft, right? Many aircrafts can have different types of passengers, but also passengers can be a part of different aircraft. Think of connected flights, right? So all these aircrafts might have a variety of different passengers at one point, right? But these passengers can also have multiple different flights at the same time, right? Therefore, sharing a many-to-many relationship. The way that we do that in Django is by using the many-to-many field, once again, adding the model that we are sharing a relationship with as the first argument, right? So if we had two tables, one being passenger, the other one being airplanes, the airplanes will have passenger is equal to models dot many to many field with the traveler as its model relationship. Do I have any questions about many to many fields? No questions. Awesome. Types of associations. Here we see a small example, right? The first class is a dining set. Notice that there is no type of relationship like visibly here. Right, so we have our, our overall our dining set. Let me see if I can am I allowed to draw? I don't think I can draw. We have the one dining. Nice, Gary, you can. I don't think I can. Oh, I can't. Let me go ahead and open this up. Can you guys see my drawings? All right, so the class itself for a dining set is the entire dining set itself, right? We have the name of the dining set, which is a 6-piece set, and the color is medium charcoal gray. We then have a different model class for stool, which I can only assume that it's this right here, right? And this has a 1-to-1 relationship with the dining sets, right? So only one stool can belong to one dining set, and that one dining set can only have that one stool. So the one stool will not belong to any other instance of a dining set, right? Now, for the chairs, we have a default of 3, but notice that they have, oh, this is the height. We have height, we have description, and this shares a many-to-one relationship with this dining set, right? This dining set can have multiple chairs, right? But these chairs can only belong to one dining set. Let's go ahead and kind of erase this. Right, chairs, we can have multiple of them and whatnot, but they can only belong to one dining set. But a dining set can have multiple instances of chairs, right? And we establish that by using the foreign key. One thing that I want to point out that you're seeing here within the lines 52 and 47 are the on delete and the related name chair. If you recall, when using PostgreSQL, we had a way of dropping tables and adding the cascade method, right? And the cascade method came in use whenever we removed something that had a dependency, right? Take the dining set and the stool, for example. If the dining set were to be deleted, but that dining set had a stool, but what do we do to the stool when the dining set no longer exists? Well, the cascade on delete models.cascade will remove the stool out of the equation because the stool has a dependency on the dining sets, right? It is relying on the dining set. So we can handle the relationships cascade method by using on delete equals to models.cascade. Next, we have the actual kitchen, right? The kitchen has a relationship with the dining sets, right? Where many kitchens can have the same type of dining set, and the dining set can belong to different many kitchens, right? So Jacob might have the same dining set, Owen might have the same dining set, and so can Sam, right? And at the same time, those dining sets belong to different people. They belong to Jacob, they belong to Owen, and they can also belong to me, right? Therefore, sharing that many-to-many connection. Oh, didn't erase. Do I have any questions about associations? Yes, Jacob.
Just so I have it right, so when you have a many to many, it's you just type out many to many, but like when it's like a many to one, then you use foreign key. Is that correct?
Correct. It might be
Okay.
a little confusing at first, but yes, the many to one is the only odd one out of this equation that likes to use the word foreign key.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
No problem. We also have something here called related name, which you might have noticed, and that's actually very useful, right? Before, when using PostgreSQL, we didn't have a direct method to seeing that relationship. Here in Django, we will, right? So whenever we create a relationship where it's like many to one or many to many, we're able to use related name so we can reference the relationship of chairs from a dining set. And we're gonna see that in action. I know it might sound a little too confusing here just talking about it, but let's actually see it in code. All right. Now, within the curriculum, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make 2 new apps that are going to help us understand the one-to-one, the many-to-one, and then for the many-to-many, we'll use the Pokemon Move and Pokemon app. Right. So we're going to say Python manage.py. I'm going to say start app, and I'm going to create a new application that's going to be called one-to-one app. And then I'm going to do the same thing for many to one. Now, this is strictly for demo purposes, so I can show you guys. You guys don't have to do it on your own project if you want to, if you're still working for the exact same project you were working earlier. But, you know, I'm just creating different copies. Yes, Owen.
When you're saying we don't have to do that, you're referencing making a whole new app for the relationships.
If you guys want to follow along, you guys can do it. I make different copies of my work, so I don't actually mess up the ongoing version of what I have for my Pokemon app. There is examples that we typically have throughout the assignments that you can have like the updated version of what your Pokemon app should look like, so you don't have to worry too much about it. But if you don't want to mess up your current one, if you've been working on one this entire time, you don't have to. I was just letting you guys know about that.
Okay, so
Right,
like if you're doing this for a real project, would you still make a whole new app, or would you just add a specific
good question.
file?
I would probably make different apps, right? Just like I have a Move app, I'm gonna use the Move app and the Pokemon app to have a many-to-many relationship, but they're 2 different apps, right? So yes, you would make different apps. I'm just saying that I am creating individual apps called one-to-one and many-to-one that aren't going to be Pokemon oriented, just to get a better understanding of how the relationships work. So this is actually not related to my project when it comes to the type of apps they are, but I'm using it as an example. Okay.
Gotcha.
All right. So for time purposes, we're not going to do a whole walkthrough of it. I have my new apps. So now I have to connect them. So I'm coming to my settings.py, and I'm going to say 1-to-one app, and I'm going to add my many-to-one app. All right. So they're connected. We're going to start with the one-to-one first. Coming to the one-to-one app, I open up my models. And the scenario that we're going to be using here is persons and profiles, thinking of social media, right? That's the scenario. So within here, I am going to create a class, which is going to be called person, which inherits from model. And this person is going to have a name type char field with a max length of 100. And because this class is in regards to associations, I'm not going to go dive deep into like what fields should we use, validators, serializers, or anything crazy yet. We're taking it one step at a time. We'll keep it as bare as possible. So this person will have a name, and we're going to create a profile. So models.model. And this profile will have a bio type text field with a max length of 255. And now, the associations part. So as mentioned before, to create an association, you have to actually, create the field. So this profile is going to have a person that it has, right? That it shares a relationship with. So I'm going to create a person field. This person field is going to be the one-to-one field key that I will use that connects that person to this profile. All right, so we call models one-to-one field. As mentioned earlier, the argument that it takes is the model that it shares that relationship with, which is person. And I'm going to add an onDelete method to handle that relationship in case the person no longer exists. And it's going to be model cascade. Models.cascade. All right. Now let's go ahead and add this to our database. I'm going to say Python make migration.
Spelled manage wrong.
Thank you.
Who's that? Yeah, I think you just gotta switch your letters around.
No module named many to one app. Oh, I had an issue here. I called it AP. Well, let's just go ahead and, for time purposes, I'm just going to go ahead and change the name, even though it's not to what I like it to be. Let's make the migrations. There we go. Manage.py migrate. Right. So I made the migrations. We can go to pSQL. I can do /D. And I have my one-to-one app and one-to-one app added in there successfully. We can also do one-to-one person and see what that gives us. Well, when I create
your microphone is breaking up very bad, Roger.
Let me see if I can get better by connecting it. Give me a second. Can you hear me better?
Yeah.
Awesome. Technology, man. So I went ahead and grabbed the one-to-one app person. And we see here, it returns to me that table. I have ID and name with the constraint. But what I want you to notice is the reference by. This is saying that table one-to-one app profile, right? This table right here has a constraint, right? That constraint is a one-to-one app profile person ID foreign key, right? That is referencing the one-to-one app person ID, right? So it's showing us the relationship here. Let's do the exact same thing for one-to-one app profile. And here we see the actual foreign key. Before we saw the reference that's coming from person. Here we see the foreign key on actual, on the profile actual model. And we see here that the one-to-one app profile person ID is a foreign key and is referencing the ID from person. All right, so we can see the relationship within our table. Let's go ahead and come to our shell. I'm going to go ahead and exit real quick. So it's tracking my changes. There we go. And let's create a person. I'm gonna say Alice is equal to person, where name is equal to Alice. For good practice, I run full clean on this. And then say Alice.save. I can print out Alice and it tells me that it is a actual object. right? Now let's create a profile. We're gonna say Alice profile is equal to profile. This takes in a bio, and the bio is gonna say I am Alice. And the second argument is the person, right? Well, we are going to pass in Alice, and Django is very smart where it knows that Alice is an actual object and it links that relationship. We pass in Alice. We can go ahead and run the full clean method once again for good measure, because that's what we do as developers. Alice profile.save, and it's good to go. When I call Alice, it gives me the person. I can say Alice.name to grab her name. It gives me Alice. Let's look at Alice profile. It gives me the profile object. I can say Alice profile.bio, and it gives me I am Alice. Well, we can also do Alice profile.person, and it'll tell us who it's assigned to, and it's the person object 1. We can also, from here, grab the name of that object, Alice person or Alice profile.person.name, and it gives us Alice. On the Alice person object, we can also grab the profile that's assigned to her that she shares a relationship with. And we can say dot profile. We see here that by calling Alice.profile, it shows us the relationship that she has. And we can even say Alice.profile.bio, and it shows I am Alice. Do I have any questions on Alice and her profile and actually these? Yes, one.
Sorry, I might have missed it. Is it a convention or something to be doing one-to-one app and then many-to-one app? Can those names ever change, or should you always put those relationships and filter them within there?
Could you
So like how you had, so how you have the folders with one-to-one app and then many-to-one app? Do we want to create those folders and then anything that's one-to-one we put in the one-to-one models, or is it just for demonstration purposes that you're doing it that way?
It's for, at the same time, it's for demonstration purposes, but also it varies on what that model is and how big it is. Right? If it's like, a major part of your application, then probably good practice to, create a whole application for it. Right? So for one, it's for demonstration purposes, but it can also be how big that part of that model is. Right? I would probably create a different one for profile, because I think profile can have a lot of stuff. And I think person can also have a lot of stuff if I was creating some kind of social media app. Does that answer your question?
So for example, you could have done, like, if we were doing the dining set example, you have the dining set project, and then you do the dining set app, right? Within the dining set app, then you can build all your models with the different relationships within there. You don't need to create different apps because it's small enough, right?
I still would. If your whole application just revolves around a dining set, I would probably create different applications for it. It will still work the same way, right? If I just did this in a different app, the connection will still work. But like I said, it varies on what the application is for, how big it is. If you plan to expand on profile, then I would change that to a different application. And think to React, like how we separate, the concerns, right? Separation of concerns into different pages, different components, and trying to keep it all contained within its own location. Does that make sense? So it is good practice to maybe have different apps. Awesome. All right. So real quick, we're gonna create a serializer for our one-to-one and see what that looks like. So within our one-to-one app, we'll create a new file, serializer.py. in here, I have to import from the REST framework serializers. I'm also going to import from my models person and profile. I have a typo. And then I'm going to create a class. I'll do the profile first, and you'll see why. Profile serializer, which inherits from serializers.model serializer. This has a class meta. The model it's going to reference is going to be profile. And I want to return all the fields. I'm going to have a person serializer. That takes a model serializer, class meta. Model is going to be person. And once again, the fields will be all. Right. Let's see what this looks like before we move on to any changes. Open it up again. I want to from 1 to 1 app dot serializers import profile serializer and person serializer. All right, we get Alice. So Alice from person dot objects dot get, where ID is equal to 1, so we only have one person. And then I want to grab Alice profile from the profile objects dot get, where ID is equal to 1. We can print out Alice, and we can print out our Alice profile. All right, we're back to where we were on our show. But do they share the relationship still? Alice.profile. We see here the profile is printed out. They do. Alice.profile.bio. And we can see her bio. All right, well, let's serialize Alice. We're going to say serialize Alice is equal to person serializer, pass in Alice. If we print out Alice, we see what we usually get. So we're going to use .data, and we see that Alice was serialized to ID 1 named Alice. It gives us everything we want, but not exactly how we want it. And I'll explain that in a bit. Let's look at a serialized version of Alice's profile. We're going to get serialize her profile by calling profile serializer. Pass in Alice profile. And then let's print out the data for her profile. And it gives us ID 1, bio is Alice, but it gives us person is equal to 1. That's not exactly how we want it. You know, that we might not want to get just like the ID of the person. We might not even want to get this. Or when we serialize our person, we might want to grab everything that belongs to that person, right? We might want to grab the profile that she has. And this isn't really doing it for us. So how do we handle a one-to-one relationship within our serializer? Well, what we can do is 2 different methods, and I will show you both. Within our serializer, we're going to come back here, and we're going to say profile is equal to profile serializer. And what this should do, right? I'm going to change this because I don't know if it's going to give me any complications. And I'm going to add ID, name, and then what I want to have here is going to be profile. Right? We are going to add the profile serializer in here because I want to be able to retrieve the profile when I serialize my person and see what profile has. Right? Let's go ahead and exit out because our shell is nitpicky. From 1 to 1 app dot serializers import person serializer, and profile serializer. We'll grab Alice from person.objects.get, where ID is equal to 1. We have Alice. Let's serialize her. Serialize Alice is equal to person serializer. And we'll pass in our Alice object. And then let's print out Alice data. And now we see here that we have the ID of Alice, her name, as well as profile, right? The profile, it shows us the ID of the profile, the bio, and once again, we see Alice returning here with the ID, a little redundant. Maybe we don't want that, right? So maybe it would be better to do something like exclude person, right? I know this is very long, so I'm trying here, but let's go ahead and redo that again. The purpose is to show you how all this works and why we want to do stuff within our serializer to ensure we grab the data that we want to get within our serializers. So we'll say from 1 to 1 app.serializers, import person serializer, profile serializer. We grab Alice once again for the last time, person.objects.get, where ID is equal to 1. Let's serialize Alice with the person serializer and print out. Oh no, it's exclude. My apologies, exclude, not excludes. Right, so it did not like the excludes. It was looking for exclude. So see, you can see here, creating a model serializer about either the fields attribute or the exclude attribute. Excludes was wrong. Let's see if we can kind of just re-import that and it doesn't get mad at us. I hope it does. Oh my God, I have to restart this show. I understand, guys. It's a little finicky working with the show. From 1 to 1 app.serializers, import the person serializer and profile serializer. Can you copy and paste into the shell? I think you can, Gary. Let's say serialize Alice is equal to person serializer, and we'll grab person.objects.get where ID is equal to 1. And let's try to knock it all out in one line. There we go. Awesome. That should have, right? So we have here our serialized data of person where it returns to us Alice, her ID, as well as her profile, right? That she shares a one-to-one relationship with. And the profile gives us the ID of the profile, the and the bio, right? Without some redundant information like person ID. Right. That was one way of doing it. For the many-to-one, I'll show you the second way of doing it, which can still be used here. Do I have any questions on one-to-one, serialize the one-to-one relationship? Right on. We're gonna go ahead pushing forward, guys. We'll take a 10-minute break from I-11, no worries. I know you guys are getting bored. So we have the one-to-one. Let's go ahead and move on to the many-to-one. Let's close this up, as well as everything else that we don't need. We're gonna come to our model, and we are gonna create a different scenario. This needs to be author and books, right? One author can have multiple books. In this scenario, only one author to only one author to the book. So many books can belong to one author, but that one author can have many books, right? So we're gonna say class author, because it's gonna be models.model, and we're gonna keep it light once again. We're just gonna add his name. We say models dot char field. Max length is going to equal to 100. And we are going to create our book model, the models.model. And the book should have a title, which is models.char field, with a max length of 100. And right? So for the many-to-one relationship, as we already saw throughout the presentation, it's going to take a foreign key field, right? So the foreign key in book is going to be called author. And it's going to be models dot foreign key, right? You might see other stuff in here. We are using foreign key. The relationship that book will have will be with the author model. On delete, I want to do models.cascade. And now we are going to use the third attribute that you guys saw, which was related name, right? And the related name is going to be called novels. Well, what is the related name going to do? Well, earlier on the one-to-one relationship, we were able to do Alice.profile, and it gave us the relationship that she shared. But with many-to-one and many-to-many, we can't do that. We have to add a related name, or we won't be able to do something like author.book, because it won't give you anything, right? Django does that for you with the one-to-one. It allows you to have that, right? It puts in that foreign key into your person as well, and you can grab it by using .profile. For many-to-one or many-to-many, we don't have that. We need related names. So by connecting the book and the author, the related name novels will be added to the author object, right? Does everyone understand that concept? And if not, we can see it in real time. Yes, James.
So I think you said this, I just want to make sure. Related name is almost like doing foreign key in Postgres. Is that sort of what it's doing?
Yeah, it's so for example, book, it knows how to deliberately grab its authors because we have a field here, right? Author doesn't. So by adding related name, it adds the novels into author. Right? Does that make sense? It'll
Yes,
look
it
something
does.
like
Thank
that.
you.
No problem. All right. Well, we have our models. We now have to migrate. So Python manage.py, make migrations. And I have to migrate into my database. We can go to our database and see our models. And we have the many-to-one author and many-to-one book, right? Let's create a serializer for it. We can go ahead and create a new file. We'll do serializers.py. And then we are going to import from REST framework, import serializers. And we are going to import our models, author and book. Right? Just like we did before with person and profile, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to say class. I'll say book serializer. I'm going to call it serializers.model serializer. And you might notice that I'm doing book first before author, very similar to how I did it on the one-to-one app. I did the profile before person. Well, that was because I wanted to have access to the profile serializer within the person, right? So I had to switch it up because if I did person first and then profile and I tried to put the profile on top, it won't understand it because of how the file is being ran. All right, so the order does matter. Yes, James, you have your hand raised? Oh, okay. So I have my serializer. It's going to be class meta. The model that the serializer is going to work with is going to be book. And the field is going to be all. And then we are going to create our author serializer, which will have serializers.model serializer. Class meta, model is equal to author. And once again, the fields will be all. All right, let's go into our shell. We're going to say from many to one app import the book serializer as well as the author serializer. It does not let me get the book serializer. Why is that? Book serializer and author serializer. I don't know if it's because of the naming convention. I really hope it's not. Oh, it definitely is. All right, let's go ahead and exit out. I'm going to do Python math.py, start app, many to one app. And then let's connect it real quick. I'll just copy and paste everything so we don't have to spend more time on this than we have to. Let's connect the actual app that we have here that we want to use. And then I'm going to grab these models. And then add it in here. Copy this. And then paste it in here. Serializer models. Okay. Let's do Python manage.py. Make migrations. Python manage.py migrate. There we go. All right. I think the naming conventions was having issues with it because I misspelled app. If it is, then Django is just very nitpicky. Let's go back into our shell. So we'll say start app. No, not start up. Shell plus from many to one app dot serializers. Did I add serializer before? Is that why it wasn't working? Author is serializer and book serializer. There we go. All right. So we have our serializer in here. We got everything set up. In author, this author is going to be called Steven. I'm going to use the author model. The author, where name is equal to Stephen King. And let's run the full clean, which should be fine. Steven.save. And then we can print out Steven. It's good. Let's create a book. This book is going to be called It's, where title is equal to It's. And the author is equal to, actually just, yeah, we'll do it. Can I create it like this? Not to be an issue. Author is equal to Steven. Run the full clean, it.save. We can print out it. There we go. Let's serialize our author. So serialize Steven is equal to author serializer. We'll pass in Steven. And now we can see Steven's data. And we see here we have ID, name, and Steven. let's serialize our book. It's equal to book serializer, and then I'm gonna pass in it. And our book is serialized, right? When we have our serialized data, when we call it and we use dot title, it's gonna give us our title. If we do dot author, it gives us our author. If we do dot name, it gives us the name of the author, very similar to how the one-to-one was working. So it's still doing everything else that the one-to-one relation was doing. We're good to go. If we do Steven dot name, it gives us a name. But notice that if I do Steven dot author, like I did with Alice dot profile, it's gonna give me an error, right? Because the one-to-one relationship, I didn't need the related name. I was able to directly call it because Django already puts a foreign key in there, being the name of the model. For the many-to-one, it doesn't do that, right? We need to explicitly give it a related name. So, as we see here, we called it novels. So we can do Steven.novels, and we get back what looks a little unreadable, but essentially is the novels that go to Steven, right? He shares a relationship with book. We can create a different book. Give me another book from Stephen King.
Storm of the Century.
That's too long. We're gonna do Holly.
Okay.
Holly is equal to
that works too.
book name Holly, right? And the book needs an author, which is going to be Stephen. It has an unexpected name, which is supposed to be title, right? So it gave us an error. We'll do Holly.full clean. We get nothing back. It's not yelling at me. So I can do Holly.save, right? And now when I call Steven dot novels, I wonder if it's because I have to save it. Steven dot save. Novels. It might not show it to me here. What is going on? Or is it because I'm in my terminal? It might be because I have to restart the terminal. As you see, guys, the shell can be very unforgiving sometimes. It doesn't like me. From main to one app, I'm going to import my book serializer and my author serializer. From many to one app dot serializers. There we go. We get Steven. Let's get author dot objects dot get, where the name of the author is called Stephen King. All right, when we do that, I'm sorry, tongue tied. When we do Stephen, we get the object. If we do name, we get his name. And now if we do novels, it's not gonna give it to me here, unfortunately. Let's check in here. Select all from many to one app. Many to one app does not exist. Many to one app author. There we go. Author and book. Okay. We can see here that Holly does exist and we have the author ID. For some reason, it looks a little weird and foreign because of the hash, but let's go ahead and add the serializers to it and see what the serializers give us back. So within the many to one app, we're gonna create, oh, we already did, right? We did serializers.py. So we don't have to do any of that. We can just come back here and say serialize Steven is equal to author serializer. I'm gonna pass in Steven And let's see what this gives us. Dot data, Stephen King. That's giving us the all because we haven't our author serializer. I see in the chat, Juan, the curriculum has that Stephen.novels.all. Not sure if maybe that was it. Yeah, let's give it a try. Let's go to Stephen.novels.all. And there we go. Thank you. It's a little hard sometimes when you get tunnel vision, you're trying to, code, and you're not, looking directly at the curriculum at all times. But we do get that the objects are in there. And we saw it in our database, so I knew they had the relationship. That's how I guess we query for multiple stuff within the many-to-one relationship. All right, well, the serializer isn't doing exactly what I wanted to do. It's not giving me back the books that belong to our author. So let's go ahead and kind of refactor that, right? Within our author serializer, what I'm going to do is call a specific method, which is the serializer dot serializer method field. So earlier on the one-to-one app, what we saw was that we just went ahead and added the profile serializer directly into the person serializer, and that did what we wanted to do. But sometimes when you're working with many to many or many to one, it's going to become fairly difficult to try to see everything exactly how you want it. And this is another method that we can use to kind of add that to how we would like it to be. Right? So we say novels is equal to serializers dot serializer method field. And what that allows us to do is to create a custom method that allows us to format the novels to how we see fit. Right? So down here, we're going to create a class. And the way that we call this class is actually very specific, right? Django, as you've already noticed, is very nitpicky. So it's going to be called get novels. The naming convention of this method has to match whatever you created here on line 10, right? So if your serializer method field is called novels, it should say get novels, right? If you change it up, you're going to get an error and it's going to yell at you. Make sense? All right. Within here, I'm going to add self, and the parameter or argument it's going to take is going to be an instance, right? This instance is referring to the instance of author that is being called on, right? Now, I'm going to say books is equal to the instance dot novels dot all. And this is where that method comes in, Juan. I guess I just forgot it, right? And what this is going to do, it's going to grab that author that's being serialized. It grabs his novels, all of them, and assigns them into books. And we can do something like serialized books is equal to and format it how we see fit, where we could do something like ID is the book.id or books.id, right? Because that's what I have here. Books.id. And then we can say title is books.title. And this will create a variable called serialized books where we format the books that the author has a many-to-one relationship. And then we can return serialized books. And now let's see what that does for us. Another thing was the field is going to return to us the IDs that it belongs to. So we might want to edit this so it doesn't return the author IDs, but we already saw that on the one-to-one app. So I'm not going to do it here. Let's just go ahead and see what this looks like. I'm going to go ahead and exit from here. Go into my shell plus and say from many to one app dot serializers imports book serializer and author serializer. I'm going to serialize Stephen by doing author serializer. And within here, I'm going to say author.objects.get, where the name is equal to Stephen King. Right, that allows me to grab the author in one go and serialize them at the exact same time. And let's look at his data. It has no attribute called ID. Books.id. Why are you yelling at me? Do you see anything I don't see? See you looking.
Should books be singular?
I think it's probably how I'm doing this. I'm gonna go ahead and come back to my serializer and say for book and books, right? Because this is probably a query set of different novels that belong to the author. It's not allowing me to grab it because it's multiple of them, right? So we do here some like some list comprehension to grab every single book, grab the ID and the title. Does that make sense? So from many to one app.serializers imports the author serializer, book serializer, serialize
I think
Stephen.
you still got to switch the books.id to book ID. Because you declared over here for book and books, but you never used book.
You're right. Thank you for letting me know that before I got too far in. All right, from many to one app.serializers imports author serializer and book serializer. Serialize S is equal to author serializer. Let's say author.objects.get where ID is equal to 1. And let's look at our data. Bada bing, bada boom. There we go, guys. We see ID 1, right? We also see novels. And actually, that's not exactly how we want it. We see novels as the second argument. Then we see the name. Why do you think that's doing that? I know why, but why do you guys think so? Well, it's how we have it in here, right? So the field is set to all, but we didn't specify an order, right? But because this is set to all, what it's gonna do, it's gonna put the novels first, and then it's gonna give me the rest of the fields that belong to author. So what we have to do here in the fields is specifically let it know what order I want it to be, right? And it would have to be ID name, and then it would be novels, right? I believe novels. I have to add it there. So when I run this from many to one app.serializers, imports the author serializer. Let's just do this one. Serialize S is equal to author serializer, author.objects.get, where ID is equal to 1. Do the data for it. And we now see where it says ID, name, Stephen King, and then novels, exactly how we wanted it to be formatted, right? Notice that the novel is formatted exactly how we wanted it to be for the author serializer. Well, let's go ahead and also import our book serializer. And we're going to say serialized book is equal to our book serializer, where I grab book dot objects dot get where ID is equal to 1. And let's look at the data. It's giving us ID, title, and author, right? We might want to remove author as well if we don't want it that way, to be redundant. But yeah, I mean, that's how it works. But notice how here we didn't have to remove the author ID when we serialize the novel within the author, right? When we did the many or the one-to-one, we have to exclude person out of here so it wouldn't show up within our person serializer, because we were deliberately using how the serializer should look like here on line 10. We're saying, hey, profile should be serialized with the profile serializer, right? So when we serialize a person and it got to the profile, it serialized it in the way that profile was set up. So we had to go back and remove person so it didn't show us the ID when being serialized within person serializer. We didn't have to do that here for the author serializer. Well, because we specified how do I want this novel to come back to me, right? We didn't use the book serializer that we created earlier. So it did not show me the author ID within the serialized author, right? So that is the difference between these two. And that allows me to also use my book serializer individually if I just wanted to grab a book. Does that make sense? And do I have any questions? All right. We still have many to many, and to talk about the Django server, time is 11:18. How is everyone feeling? Do we need that 10-minute break? And should we risk doing this in the afternoon, or do we keep pushing forward?
Take 10.
Continue? All right.
Take 10.
Take 10? Continue? I'm hearing mixed reviews. I see a thumbs down from Sam Park. I don't know what that means.
10. 10.
10? All right, right on. Hey,
10.
the group has spoken.
I want
I'll
to
see you guys.
continue. I just want to get through it at this point.
Let's come back at 11:29 and we'll get to the rest of the lesson afterwards. All right.
Hey, Roger.
Give me a second. Let me pause the recording. All right, coming back to today's lesson, we were discussing many-to-one relationships. We were able to serialize the author, right? So we have the author with the ID name, and then we were able to get the novels, which it shares a many-to-one relationship with. The novels returns a formatted dictionary that we kind of created here. Small recap on the serializer method here. We are essentially creating a whole new field here, right? We create that field by calling the serializer method field, where this field, we can format it to return to us what we want, right? Because as we saw with the one-to-one, it was returning to us pretty much everything within the book serializer, and it was getting very weird, giving us redundant information. Therefore, we create this field ourselves using serializer. We add that field that we created within our fields that we want to be returned when we serialize an author. And then we actually have to kind of define how that, serializer method field works. So we give it a very specific name. It has to start with get, and then the second, word in here has to be the name of the field that you're trying to create, right? Very specific. Remember that. It takes in the instance, that is the instance of the author or whatever you're passing in within your serializer specifically. We use instance.novels.all. .novels being the relationship that it shares with the book. We got .all to query all the books. We use a new variable where we essentially add we did like some list comprehension here where we could essentially loop through all the books and then get the book title. For those of you who might find this a little bit confusing, essentially what we did here was we created a variable where it was like serialized books is equal to like an empty list, and then we did for book in books. Oh, we did for book and books, right? Where we got the query set of book instances. And when we created a dictionary and said book.id, right? And we like manually assigned it, right? That's essentially what we just did here, but in a one line, right? We did it all in one line, saved it to this variable, and that's what we're returning. Let's go ahead and remove this. I don't need this. So we were able to serialize the author to return to us what we needed. The book right now, after we used it, it returned ID, title, and then the author. You could use a formatted method of doing this. We could do like author is equal to serializers dot serializer method field. We could remove the all, add ID, name, and then add it our new field we created. Right, we would create a default method which is called define get author, where we take in the instance, and it could return to us the author we want, right? So it would be author name is equal to instance dot, and it would be essentially author, right? Instance dot author, because it's the book to the, let's try it out. Let's see how this works. Author, and then we can return author name. I believe this should work. Exit out. Python manage.py, shell plus. We go ahead and do from many to one dot serializers, import the book serializer. Many to one app. Dot serialize, there we go. We're gonna get our book, which essentially is, where do we get book? Oh, yeah. Let's copy this. Listen to Gary. And give.data. Field name is not valid for model book. What do you mean? Oh, it's supposed to be title. Right? Get ID equals 0. No, this is referring to the serializer name title.
Could it be because your many to one app, is that 1P or 2Ps? Because it looks like it's 1P in your on the side.
There's two apps here.
Oh, I see it. Never mind. I didn't even look down.
It's let's actually read this, right? It's saying that
Yeah,
the field name is not valid for the model book. Or what does it mean by name? Well, I didn't add anything weird here. It's referring to this, right? It actually, I think it tells us where in serializers and book serializer. Our book doesn't have a field name called title. I'm sorry, name. It's called title, not name. Does that make sense? So essentially, we define the fields wrong. Exit out. Open this up. Copy and paste this again. And I did not import it from many to one dot app or underscore app dot serializers. Import our book serializer. Now we can call this and print it out. Let's see if it works. Dot data. And it's returning the author. So it returns a whole object, which isn't exactly what we want. So essentially we would do dot name, right? Or yeah, dot name, because that's the value that the author has. I'm not gonna go ahead and do that because I'm tired of importing the serializer. But do you guys see how this works? Do I have this guy?
So what is? I'm kind of lost. For what
where is that?
Your get author function is doing.
My get author function where? I'm sorry.
On
Right
line
here?
10, the one we just made.
Okay, yeah. So we saw two methods of serializing the relationships that we have, right? The first one was the profile and the person serializer. We created the profile serializer that essentially serializes a profile object, correct? Still with me? Now, the next thing was creating a serializer for the person. Well, person has a relationship with profile. I would like to return anything that my person might have a relationship with, right? Think of it like Pokemon. You would like to get your Pokemon, right? The data from the Pokemon. Wouldn't it be cool to also know what moves it has? So that's what we are doing. So we have to serialize that object that it has saved within the move. For this person, the object it has saved is going to be the profile, right? Because we essentially created the models to be that way, where the person is a model, the class of profile is a model. This becomes an object when it's instantiated. This becomes an object when it's instantiated. When we connect them together, that means that person serializer has a relationship with a profile, which we attached, right? We can see that with selecting the, let's go with selecting app, select author, no. Let's select all from view 1 to 1 app person. We don't see it here, but we can see it on the profile. If we import, we don't even have to import it. We can say Alice is equal to the person dot objects dot get, where ID is equal to 1. We can see Alice is an object, Alice dot profile, right? An object saved into it, right? That happened whenever we created that one-to-one relationship. So when I get Alice back, when I serialize Alice, I want to grab all the information Alice has. Well, she also has objects that she has a relationship with, so I want to serialize those objects. And that's what these serializers are doing.
Yeah, I get that. I got confused on the one-to-many. So
Okay.
like what exactly is going on with the one-to-many? That's where I'm confused at.
Yeah. So that's why I was going over this one. Here,
Gotcha. Yeah.
I just added the profile serializer directly into person serializer, right? I already created it. I might as well just use it in here. And what happens is it will serialize my profile, right? Exactly how this is, where it won't return the person ID, but it will return everything else. Now, for my many to one, it's a little bit different, right? And the reason for that is because if I just go ahead, remove this, let's remove this, and let's remove this. And I'm gonna go ahead and pass in the book serializer in here and say novels is equal to book serializer. Right, that's pretty much the exact same thing we did here, right? Let's go ahead and exit out. Come back in. We're gonna go ahead and say from many to one app.models imports the author serializer. My bad, not models. Import serializers. Right, so we got that. We have one author. I'll just use A for author, and I'm gonna say author serializer author.objects.get where ID is equal to 1. The author is, let's say, why is it giving me an issue? Object has no attribute title. When attempting to get a value for field title on serializer book serializer, it didn't work. There's an issue with my book serializer. Let's look at my models.
Is it supposed to work? Is it supposed to work? Because it says a one to many, right? And it's supposed to have that related.
This is many to one. It should have the ID, title, and author. But it's not returning that. And I don't think. Maybe because of naming. Is it gonna be picky because of name? I don't think it will. Well, I mean, let's look at what he has. It's an author. We can say author dot name. It's saying author serializer object has no attribute. What did I do wrong? Author serializer, authors dot objects dot get. Did I not get it? The objects dot get where ID is equal to 1. Author dot name, Stephen King. Yep. Author dot novels dot all. So we have the novels. Okay. It says serialize A is equal to author serializer. And then we will pass in A in here. The author is fine. What happens is when I try to use dot data, an issue with the way that it's trying to grab book or novels. And that's probably because the naming convention. All right. Well, do you see that the issues with this of why this is very confusing with many to one? Like trying to use it the same way that we did on one to one doesn't really work as you might want it to do it. It can get very conflicted with the amount that the fact that there's many books that are assigned to author. So
yeah,
right.
So what is so the novels? So all the stuff you just commented out. I understand that that's what it's handling that data differently from the one to one.
Yes, we'll take it one step at a time. Let's do author first. Okay. Let's not even look at book.
Thank you.
Right? We obviously can't use this one. This is weird. It does not like it. We have to create our own method to handle that novel, right? Because author, as of right now, it has title. No, it only has name. So they should return ID name. I know that it has novels assigned to it, right? I know that it does. And I want to be able to return it to me. Well, I'm going to create a method for that. This is creating a customized field, right? A customized field. And by creating this customized field, I can add it in here explicitly, like, hey, this is what I want you to return back. Okay, well, what is novels? Well, I have to tell it what it should have. So I have to create a method. And this get novels is linked to the novels serializer method field I just created. Right? This is saying, hey, I'm gonna grab the data that you need for this field that you just created. And this is how I'm gonna do it. I'm taking in the instance of whatever's calling me. In this situation, it's the author serializer. I want to get the novels that belong to this object that's calling me. Right? And I'm gonna get all of them. I'm gonna save it into books. And then we essentially did some form of a for loop and assigned it into a variable called serialized books. This right here is formatting these novel objects that are currently assigned to author in a way that we can read it, right? And then it returns it to us. This, whatever this returns, gets saved into the novels field. And obviously we are calling the novels field right here. We're adding it into this part. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, where are you getting the books though for your in your for loop? What is books?
Yes, books. This is the get novels is called by the instance of this class, right?
Okay.
This, when we use the serializer, how did we use it? We said in an object. What is A? Over here, look what I did here. I did A is equal to author.objects.get. I queried the author, Stephen King, and I saved it into A. I even printed it out here. A is an author object. A.name is Stephen King. Right? So this is an object right now. An object that belongs to Stephen King, right? That this is my author object that I have in my database. Now, I passed in that author here into my serializer. So my serializer takes that object. It is an instance of an object, right, that I got from my database. That's this right here. The instance is being used by the serializer, right? It grabs that object I have in here. That object, author, has novels, right? How do I know it has novels? Well, because when I declared it and I created books that were assigned to an author, I use the related name. So although you don't visually see it, you can call .novels and it'll return to you any book that's out there that might have the name of that author saved in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the lines are all connecting now, or the dots are connecting now.
No problem. So that's where we got the, that's where we got the instance, right? Where it's being called here on this line. We passed in the instance into the author serializer. That's an object of an author, which also has novels assigned to it because of the relationship. So we do .novels. And we use .all because it's multiple of them, right? It's a many to one. It has a query set of them, saves it to the books, and then essentially what I do is I iterate through that query set to grab every individual novel object and I format it.
Gotcha.
Yes, James.
So after all of that, novels is then passed in line 19 with the novels in like a string quote. Is that how it's then displayed? I'm surprised that's not like a variable in like curly brackets or something is what I'm wondering.
Where? Here?
18, yeah.
Well, this gets returned into this novel field, right? And then here we let it know where to put it, right? This is some kind of Django magic, right? I understand what you're saying. Well, but you can make the same argument here. Like, well, I'm surprised that we don't have curly brackets for name or ID, right? This is a field. This author serializer, it currently, when it's being called, it's holding our object, and it also has this novel's data member. It uses the object that's being passed in it, the novel that we created in it, and is adding it into the fields. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and that's why calling it field is really specific, so it will work its magic or whatever.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So let's see how this works. Right? Once again, this is gonna be the last walkthrough for this because we need to move to many to many. We're gonna run the shell plus from many to one dot serializers imports author serializer. I'm gonna end up copying this and book serializer. Many to one app. Wow. What do you mean? From many to one app dot serializer import author serializer book. Am I doing it wrong? Book serializer. Here we go. Okay. And we are going to grab our author again. Again, A is equal to author dot objects dot get, where ID is equal to 1. We print it out, it's an object. I can say A dot name, it gives me Stephen King. I can say A dot novels, and it gives it to me, but obviously, as we've already discussed before, it's in a hash version. So we have to do A dot novels dot all, and it returns to me the query set. The same thing we're doing here within the serializer, James, as you see, right? The instance of this author, I call dot novels dot all, and it returns to me a query set, as you see here, of book objects, right? Cool. A ser, so a serialized equal to author serializer. I'll pass in A in here, A dot data. Why do you hate me? Author object has no attribute. What are you talking about? Oh, my bad. A serialized dot data. There we go. I called the wrong one. So A underscore ser, which for me it stands for author serialized dot data, returns to me the serialized version of this author, all the novels he has. And then now let's only serialize a book on its own. Because in your application, you might want to be able to grab all authors, a specific author, or you might want to grab books, right? And just books. So when you grab that book, you need to be able to serialize a book in its own. And maybe that book should also tell you who is the authors, right? Which is why the book serializer should have its own serializer. So this book should equal to book.objects.get, where ID is equal to 1. What is it? Let's see, dot name, I believe it's it. Or sorry, dot title. Dot title. Yep. Book.title. Let's do book.ser or underscore ser. And let's go ahead and serialize it. Dot data. And it returns to us book serial, the ID, the title, and the author of the book. But now, is this what you want, James? When you call for a book, do you want the ID of the author? No, we do not. Right? This doesn't tell me anything as a user. Like, who is author 1? I don't know. So we have to edit the serializer for the book. Well, I need a way to get who exactly this author is. Well, let's recreate this field because it's not giving me what I need. So I'm going to create a new field called author, right? Using the serializer method field. And I need a way to add some value into that author. So I'm going to create this method called getAuthor, which takes in the instance that my book serializer has, right? And that's what, once again, last time I'm going to do this one. I'm going to exit out this shell. Let's open it up. Let's import it. I am sick and tired of importing this one. So let's go ahead and copy it. I've done this like 20 times at least today with all my mistakes. Right? So we say book is equal to book.objects.get, where ID is equal to 1. Let's print it out real quick just to make sure it's what I think it is. It is it. Let's serialize this book by calling book serializer. Pass in the book. And let's print out the data. And now it actually gives us something that as a user we could use. Right? Does that make sense to you guys? Right? That's why we gave a serializer to the book, and we had to edit it the way they did, because before it wasn't giving us anything useful. All right, guys, moving on. We are going to go back to the Pokemon scenario. We talked about one-to-one, many-to-one, and for the Pokemon scenario, we'll actually walk through for the many-to-many relationship using our actual project. So let's close this up.
Can you zoom in one click, Roger?
Yes, I can. Thank you. I apologize if you guys couldn't see the entire time. I'm so glad to be away from that author book. Lord. All right. Now, we close out these apps, no longer needed. Where are we going to add the relationship? On the Move app or the Pokemon app? What do you guys think?
The relationship with what?
We are going to create a relationship between Move app or moves and a relationship between Pokemon.
Okay.
Right? So we need to add the foreign key. It's okay. That's okay. I like y'all's question. So where should we put the relationship, right? We did it on the person profile. Where do we add the one-to-one key or the one-to-one field? On the author and book, where do we add the many-to-one field? So who should have the many-to-many?
Pokemon?
Both?
I would say move. Technically, there is no right answer or wrong answer. You can do it in both.
Okay.
They will both work. I'm sorry. No, let me rephrase that. You can't do it on both. You can do it on one or the other. Right? Don't go put it on both models, all right? Whichever one you decide to put it on will work. We are going to do it on the moves because I feel like Pokemon is a much bigger object than a move is. It's like the primary part of my application. And usually, whenever you add keys to or a relationship, like a foreign key to something else, you want to put it on that's dependent. So if it was a many-to-one relationship, we saw the author in the book. Who got the many-to-one field in it? The book, right? That's the dependent one because that's the one that has the most books. So that's who got it. So we're gonna go to our Move app under models, and we are going to add a new field to our move. And this field is going to be what? What do you guys think that we're going to call it?
Moves.
No, this is the Pokemon move table, but good guess. We're gonna call it Pokemon.
Ike?
We're gonna call it Pokemon, right? So, if I query a move, right? This is me thinking if I'm making this Pokédex and I want to be able to grab a move, it should give me back in return all the Pokemon that can use this move, right? So I'll call it Pokemon. It's gonna be models dot. And what do you guys think it's gonna be?
Many to many field.
Many to many field, right? Many to many field. What are the arguments that it takes? What's the first argument at least?
what model you're pulling from.
Correct. And I need to import Pokemon because it does not exist in here, right? The other scenarios we had, we created the class within the same file, but this time we don't have that. So we're going to say from the Pokemon app.models import Pokemon. If you try to do both of these, right, on both apps, you're going to get an import error, right? Keep that in mind. If you try to import move into Pokemon, you're going to get an import error, and you're going to be wondering why it's error. Because you're importing them into each other, and it does not like that. Just be aware of that.
So to make sure that you're always importing into the file that you have the relationship in, correct? Like this one has the many-to-many field inside of it, so we're importing into that from the other one.
Yeah, it makes sense that way.
Okay.
I'm sure you're gonna run into that problem. Yes, Owen.
I know this is getting ahead. Are we gonna have to make an extra model for mini to mini? Are we not?
That's a great question. Let's see
similar. Okay.
Well, I'm not nodding yes as we will, but let's see how Django actually handles that, because you'll get to see it in like 30 seconds. All right. But I like the question. Your head's in the right spot. That is perfect. So we're gonna say many to many field, and we are going to give it our Pokemon. And then within here, we are going to do related name is equal to, and we'll call it moves. Did you guys say we're gonna add it to the Pokemon app or the Pokemon model because that's how the curriculum has it? Is that how you guys guessed it?
I was literally just guessing.
Okay. Yeah,
It was
on the
literally just a
curriculum.
dumb guess.
No, I mean it's okay. On the curriculum, it says that the Pokemon has the many to many field there. We could do it there either or, it'll be fine. We'll just do it on the moves one. So we have moves. Do we need add on delete? Why yes or why no?
No, because there's multiple instances. It's not just relying on one, I'm assuming.
Correct. Right? If Pikachu can use Scratch and Charizard can use Scratch, well, if I delete Pikachu, does that mean I have to delete Scratch too? Well, if I do that, then now Charizard, like, he can't use it. So we don't want to do that, right? So we don't add on delete. So we made a change to our model. So we're going to come back to here. We're going to say Python manage.py make migrations. And then we'll say Python migrate. Manage.py migrate. Right. So we now did that. Well, let's see what it did in our database. Do we say /d? It's going to show us the models. And when we go to the move, we see move at move. And then there's something new in here. Move app move Pokemon. We didn't have that before. Before it was just the move app, right? At the one table which we would store moves, right? Just like Pokemon has its own table where it stores its Pokemon, but now there's something new here. And essentially what it did, it created a connecting table, right? The question that Owen asked, are we going to create another table? Django does it for you. So we do not, right? Roger, what's a connecting table? It's been a while since we talked about that. Well, here is a nice little diagram, right? We have the Pokemon model that essentially holds a Pokemon ID and the name. And then we had what originally was just the move table with the move ID and move name. But when we added that many-to-many relationship, what it did when we migrated was it created a move Pokemon table. And this table is what it utilizes to make connections between the Pokemon and the move. From this diagram, we can see that we have different Pokemon and their IDs and different moves with their IDs. Pikachu has two different moves, right? Whenever we want to make a move, let's say we want to assign to him, which is in this scenario, he has right here, we can see him. We have the Pokemon ID. Pikachu appears twice, right? He appears the first 2 times, and then what move is he appearing with? We see 1 and 2. This is Scratch and Bite. What this is telling me is that Pikachu has a many-to-many relationship with the moves, and the moves are Scratch and Bite, right? So Pikachu has 2 moves, and if we look at these moves, well, this is Scratch. We see here that it does share that relationship with Pikachu, but Scratch also shares a relationship with whatever Pokemon ID 2 is, which is Charmander, right? So moves can belong to different Pokemons, or at the same time, different Pokemons can have different moves, and we use this table to keep track of that, right? Let's say I no longer wanted Pikachu to have Scratch. He out-leveled it. He's like level 13, and he's gonna learn Thunder Shock, but I need to drop a move. Well, the way I would drop it is I would drop it from this table. So essentially, I would remove him from here. I'm dropping Pokemon and the move ID, which is 1. That means he's gonna forget that move, right? There is no longer a connection between Pikachu and Scratch within this move table. Uh-oh, Pikachu's trying to learn a new move. Do you want to forget a move? Yes, we forgot it. Now let's learn a new move. So Pikachu now has a connection. So we add them again to the table at the very bottom, right? The new move he's trying to learn is Scary Face. So we add it here, right? And then Pikachu went from knowing that other move, Scratch, to learning Scary Face. All right, so Scary Face shares a relationship. So actually, this is done right here. But does that make sense? We essentially changed that relationship where he does not know Scratch, but now he knows Scary Face. But we were able to delete that without removing Scratch completely, right? Scratch still exists. Other Pokemon can use it. Yes, one.
I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but I'm assuming you're going to show us how to access Pokemon ID, for example, and Move ID or whatever, so that we can drop it from these tables.
We will. We're going to serialize them right now so we can also see it. So going back to the code. Let's go ahead and go over here. So we have our move. We have our Pokemon. Let's enter our shell. What's going on? Where's my shell plus? All right. So my model for move is updated. Let's see what I have for all moves. All moves is equal to move.objects.get as I was .all. All moves. I have Scratch. I have Thunder Shock. Let's add a couple more just to get as a variety here. Let's go ahead and do flamethrower is equal to move. The name is equal to flamethrower. Right. Let's run the full clean method. And then .save. We'll do one last one. Let's do. I really suck at this. Rock Smash. Rock Smash is equal to move, name, Rock Smash. Once again, let's do the full clean to ensure it meets the criteria. Rock Smash .save. All right, cool. Let's run all moves again to ensure we have an updated variable for that, we have Scratch, Thundershock, Flamethrower, and Rock Smash. All Pokemon. Let's see what Pokemon we have. Pokemon dot objects dot all. We have only one. I'm gonna create Charizard is equal to Pokemon name Charizard. Charizard dot full clean. Charizard dot save. Now do one last one for good measure. This will be Squirtle is equal to Pokemon name is equal to Squirtle. And I know it's good, so I'm just gonna do dot save. All right. So we have these Pokemons, we have these moves. How do we actually create this? Well, let's see if we do Squirtle dot moves dot all. We see here that Squirtle on a field called moves, right? We query them all by using the dot all. And obviously, there's nothing in there. It's empty. But what that is telling me is that there is a relationship between my moves table and a relationship between my Pokemon table. It just doesn't exist in there, right? I can say flame thrower dot Pokemon dot all. Once again, empty query set. So it's in there, but it's not working exactly how I want it because they don't have any relationship, right? So the way that I do this, or you're going to do, is as follows, right? So let's go ahead and do Pikachu, and you're gonna call the dot moves, and you're gonna do dot add. Now, why is that? Query at its bare foundation is essentially a set, and to add and remove stuff from a set, you use the add or the remove function. So to add that relationship, you're gonna do add. But what do you want to add? You're gonna pass in one of the IDs of these moves. I want to give Pikachu Thundershock. It is my second move in here, so I'm gonna go ahead and add 2. Pikachu is not defined. All right, guy. Pikachu is equal to Pokemon dot objects dot get, where name is equal to Pikachu, and then we can do Pikachu dot moves dot add 2. Now we can say Pikachu dot moves dot all, and we see here that Pikachu Thundershock. Let's add another one in here. He should have Scratch because he is very low level. So I'll add 1 in here. We'll query the all, and we see we can we have the Scratch and the Thundershock. Cool. Well, let's add Scratch to another Pokemon to see how that works. We now have a Pokemon with many moves, but let's have a move that can be to multiple Pokemon. So we will say Charizard dot moves dot add, and I'm gonna give him Scratch. And I can say dot moves dot all, and we see that Charizard now has that that move. Let's go ahead and save this before I lose it by closing my show by accident. So I know that Pikachu and Charizard do have moves, right? Let's call the Scratch move. So Scratch is equal to move dot objects dot get, where the name is equal to Scratch. All right, I want to be able to get access to it. Scratch dot Pokemon dot all, and we see here that Scratch has 2 Pokemon that they share the relationship with. which is Charizard and Pikachu. So we saw that already with Pikachu that had Thundershock and Scratch. And Scratch is showing us that it has 2 Pokemon that it belongs to. Now, let's see how that looks like in our table. As a matter of fact, I think I have to save. Now that should be fine. I think if I save that on one end, it should be good. Let's go to our table here. We're gonna say select all from Pokemon at Pokemon. Let's see here. That's in there, but we don't have the moves here, of course. Obviously, same thing for the move because it's Postgres and it's not the same as Django, right? But if we do move at move Pokemon, we see here the table with the relationships. And it's telling us that there is a move with a move ID of 2 that shares a relationship with a Pokemon of Pokemon ID 1. And then there is another move here with ID 1 that appears twice that belongs to 2 other Pokemon, one being ID 1 and one being ID 2. And now we see the connection with that connecting table. Do I have any questions on many to many relationships? Sam, I see, looks like you're smiling underneath your camera. Is that what you're doing? Yes, Juan.
Yeah, a little bit.
The move ID and the Pokemon ID didn't come because of the names. That came because of the classes names, right? So if the class was named instead of move, it was move or moves with an S, it would be moves underscore ID, right?
I don't think I understand the question that you're asking. Could you
So
kind
like
of show me
related,
where?
I was thinking it was gonna be the ID was gonna come from the related names, but instead it seems like it's coming from the class name instead. Is that right?
The class name instead.
Yeah, so let's say instead this class um was trainer or something, right?
Okay.
The table's ID instead of move ID would be now trainer ID. Does that make sense? Like if
I'm
you look
so
at your table again, where are you getting move ID from? How is that populating?
where on here do we see
You can
that?
go back to the tables real quick.
Okay.
So you see the second one, move underscore ID.
Oh, you talking about these right here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it knows to do that. That's some more Django magic, right? When we created the models, you remember when I showed you guys that the ID was automatically created for you? We didn't have to give it an ID field like we did in PostgreSQL. It automatically created. You guys remember that? And it's doing the exact same thing here too. We use the IDs. Why? Because if you recall from PostgreSQL, they're unique identifiers, right? The ID is not going to change. So a connecting table like this, it's going to use the IDs. We're not going to use names or accuracy or power because that could change with time, right? But the ID, only one instance of that object will ever have the ID. And you've seen it when we deleted like the first entry, like that would never repeat itself, right? So IDs will automatically be used. We didn't have to input this move ID. Shoot, we didn't even have to create this table, right? When we added that many to many relationship, it knew to create that connecting table for us. Does that make sense? How does it know that it's supposed to be move ID and it's supposed to be Pokemon ID? Well, because that's the name of the table, right? So if we were to change this table name, it would be trainer ID. Does that make sense? Very similar to how, notice that on the table names, let's query this again. Oh, we never told it what to call this table. but it said, hey, I'm grabbing this from Move app. This model belongs to Move, so I'm gonna call it Move ID. And this is what I'm naming it, right? When it created the Pokemon app, hey, it used the app that it's coming from as a prefix, and then it used the name of the model next, right? So it's gonna do that for you. It'll pre-format it for you, and that's what it's gonna call it, right? So when it created that many-to-many relationship, it knows, hey, this is coming from this table. I'm gonna grab its ID and I'm calling it this table ID. Make sense? All right, Owen.
So my question is, where we did our line 12, where we connected Pokemon to Move and made that third table, that connecting table, we could have done that in Pokemon, correct? And replaced Pokemon with Move equals models dot many to many field Move, comma related name.
Correct.
Okay.
The curriculum
It's
has
just
it that way. It's whichever one, either
It's
or.
just whatever you want to do. That's how you do it.
Yeah, you could. Yes, Len. Yes, exactly.
You could, but you shouldn't. Python has built-in powers. SQL is a pain in the ass. As your program gets bigger and different people are working on the same code base and building functionality, they may use one of your models and some of the data and then create another model and connect them together, right? And then now it's intertwined. This is to show you that underneath the hood, Django is doing a lot of work for you and will continue to take care of you because Django is good Django. And so before you do
what are you saying we should do then?
use the models and let Django do the connections. Don't try and be clever and think of all the connections. Like Django, this was built into Django because SQL is an ass pain and we are not SQL database managers. And it takes that cognitive load off of your brain. Understand what your schema is, understand what things are connected, and then know that when you're doing these things, when you're connecting many to many, that you may have been able to make a different choice. And by locking yourself in there down the road, you're going to cause good things to happen and oh shits to happen. It's just going to happen. It's part of a project getting bigger. I mean, the purpose here is understanding how Django builds the schema and that it's doing things under the hood that are those batteries included. There's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to build a database.
All right, let's go ahead.
It's very art.
Len, I appreciate. Thank you for your feedback. It's good stuff. I'm not trying to cut you off and be rude. I do apologize. But we have a whole other part of this to finish. All right, so moving on. So we're gonna go ahead and create the serializer for this real quickly. We have the Move app. We created the serializer.py. This is what our Move serializer looks like. But let's look at our Pokemon app serializer. Right, we now have that many-to-many relationship, and we need to find a way to actually deal with that. So what we are going to do is we are going to import. Actually, we don't have to import anything. We know that our Pokemon has ID, name, level, but now I want it to also return to me moves, right? And we know it's a query set, right? We know that it's a many-to-many relationship, so it has to handle multiple of them, and we need a elaborate way of doing that. So we're going to create the moves field that we discussed earlier, and make a custom serializer method field for this. We need a way to format that data. So we're going to say define get moves, which is self, and it takes in the instance that's passed into our serializer. And the instance moves needs to be grabbed as follows: instance.moves.all. Right. In this scenario, we're passing in a Pokemon object into our serializer. Right. That is that instance. We know that we can grab the moves of that Pokemon by using .moves. right? We've seen that here, Charizard.moves.all. So this will return to me a query set of the moves that belong to this Pokemon instance. And then I'm going to say serialized moves is equal to, and then we can say move.name for move and moves. Right, that's going to iterate through this query set of moves, grab every individual move and give me the name that belongs to it. And then we just return serialized moves. Right? So that takes care of our Pokemon. Now let's update our move. So our move serializer. Our move serializer should be able to do something very similar to what our Pokemon did. So we are going to update these fields. And this should return to me the ID, the name, power, accuracy, and all the Pokemon that currently have this move. Well, we already learned how it works with many-to-many query sets, right? So we probably have to create a way of how to format all these queries. So we're going to say Pokemon is equal to a custom serializer field that we are going to create once again. How do I want to handle that data? Define get Pokemon, taking cell, and that instance of my move. I want to grab all the Pokemon that this move is sharing a relationship with, and it's going to be instance.pokemon.all. Right? Pretty much very similar to how the Pokemon work, but this time we're doing it on the move side. Right? We'll say serialized Pokemon is equal to we'll say x.name for x in Pokemon. So it goes through all the Pokemon this move shares a relationship with. It grabs your name and saves it in a list. And then let's return the serialized Pokemon. Good to go. Let's go ahead and exit from the terminal from the shell plus. Come back in and say from move app.serializers, import the move serializer. From the Pokemon app.serializers, import the Pokemon serializer. All right, we're going to do one for each. We're going to say Pikachu is equal to Pokemon.objects.get, where name is equal to Pikachu. Let's ensure that's who this is. Yep. And then we'll say Scratch is equal to move.objects.get, where the name of that move is called Scratch. Good to go. That is what I wanted. So now let's serialize Pikachu. It's going to be Pokemon serializer. I'm going to pass it my Pikachu instance. Now we can see what this Pikachu has. And we see here it is ID, name Pikachu, level 5. And the moves is not giving me exactly what I was looking for. It's giving me the ID. We are going to have to fix that later.
Is it because of line 5? The serializers.serialize method field, and then you gotta call the function with the parentheses.
Yes, that is absolutely right. Thank you. Well, we'll do that in a bit. Let's look at the serialized move since that one was done correctly. Good catch, Scary. Let's serialize the Scratch. We'll say move serializer, passing Scratch. And then let's see the serialized version of this. We see here that Scratch, since we did do it correctly, we added it right. We see ID is 1, a name Scratch, power 70, accuracy 70, and then the Pokemon, it gives me the list of the Pokemon I wanted to. Right? Now, last thing, let's make sure that that Pokemon is done. So from Pokemon dot underscore app dot Pokemon. I'm sorry, correction, serializers. Import Pokemon serializers. And then we're gonna say serialized Pikachu is equal to Pokemon serializer. Pokemon.object.get, where the name is equal to Pikachu. Objects. And let's look at Pikachu.data. And there you have it, guys. Where I have the Pikachu, and then the moves being passed in with the actual name of the moves. Do I have any questions before we move on to the Django server and call it quits on this one?
Sorry, I'm just laughing because I forgot we had Django server today still.
That'll be quick, I promise you. All right. Okay. Any questions? Save them to the end. I can handle them after the class. Now, let's go ahead and exit out of here. Let's look at the Django server. So we got an introduction to the Django server already, right? Where we ran the server and we were able to see it, right? And the way that we're going to do that is by using the command run server. So we can say Python -py run server. And we're going to see here that we get that the Django version of the settings was ran, and it started the server at 127.0.0.1 at port 8000. And when we run the server, the settings.py gets ran once, and that is it, right? If we make any changes to our settings.py, we have to set and restart it. But everything else, like our models, gets updated in real time. So that's one thing to about our Django server. Let's open up the server and see what it looks like. We have this window where we can see that our Django server is working correctly. We have this being printed out here that our debug is true. That's currently located within my settings.py file. All right, Pokemon or Pokedex project settings.py. There is a section here where it says debug is equal to true. Notice that it says that we don't want to run it if it's in production. Set the alter before deploying your site. And when it comes to the admin site, we have one URL that we have access to, which is the admin site. And that is going to bring me to the next part of the lesson, which is where is this coming from? Well, that's one of the installed apps we have here, which is django.contrib.app. But how does it know to make a URL for it? Well, you might have already realized that we have a urls.py within our project. Let's see that. I don't think we've looked at it yet, right? Notice that we are importing admin, right? That's the installed app we have. And then we have URL importing pattern. Well, the way that it works is that we create a URL pattern, or essentially for the default version for the project, it makes one for you. And it creates one URL path for you. So as of right now, the only URL path we have is the admin sites. And that's what's bringing us here. This specific URL path is what's taking us there. And if we edit this, we can say my special admin. And we can come back here. And if we refresh this, we now get an error, right? We get an 404 error. It tried putting a GET request to the admin URL, but it failed because it doesn't recognize that URL pattern. It looks at the URL pattern within our project. We see here that it looks at Pokédex project.urls, and the only URLs that it finds is the my special admin. It doesn't know what admin is, right? But if we come here and we say my special admin, it now takes us to the admin site, right? That URL pattern was edited, and now the actual point of it took it somewhere else. Now it's actually working. So we can see there that we can create our own URL patterns. We don't have other stuff like Pokemon yet, right? So we get errors. The example we are going to use today is going to be triangles. And triangles does not exist. Well, because it doesn't know what to do with that, right? Django only knows what to do by the URL patterns. So within here, URL. Well, essentially, URL is a uniform resource locator, which is essentially an address that's used to access resources on the internet, like the web pages or images, right? Uniform stands for a standardized format across the web. Resource is essentially resources that are used, such as a web page, and the locator is the exact address where the resource is located at. Now, what if we wanted to create our own URL paths? Well, we see here on the path, it has two arguments. We have the URL pattern, and we have admin.site.urls, right? The URL patterns essentially takes two different arguments. One is the URL pattern, and the second one is a view function, or the location of another URL.py. I say that because when we create our URL patterns for our different models, we are going to link this specific URL patterns to URL.py files from our different models. And then those URLs.py in our models will take us somewhere else, right? So let's actually manipulate this a little bit and see how this works. We are going to create a new path. So after this path, we're going to say path. And I want to create a path for a location called squares. Right? And now we actually have to create some kind of function for this to do something. So we are going to create a function up here that's going to be called square area view. And it's going to take in a request. The request isn't always used, but it lets us know what it's going to do. And I'll show you that in real time. Right, this function is going to be our view. Notice the naming convention of view. Essentially, what view is how can I say it? Well, in the old times, when URL patterns were used, they would essentially return to us HTML. They were called views, right? And essentially, it's a function of what we want it to do. This is your GET request, your POST request, your PUT request, and your delete request, right? So I'm going to add this view that I just created within my pattern, right? So I say path squares / and I'm going to add square area view, right? Right now, it doesn't do anything besides this, but we probably want to return something. Let's see how this works. We're going to come up here. I'm going to say squares. And it's giving us an error because it's expecting a response, but we're not returning a response. So to do that, we have to actually import our responses. So we are going to go ahead and do from Django dot core, I believe. No, dot HTTP. Import HTTP response. And that's going to allow us to actually use a response to return something to our browser. And here I'm going to say return HTTP response. and it should be true. If we run this, we no longer get an error. The inspect tool, what is that response? Right? It ties hand in hand when you guys were using React and you were putting in requests to different parts of the APIs and you were expecting a response to come back. Well, that's pretty much what we ended up doing. Let's see if we can find squares. Let's put this in again. There we go, squares. When we go to this URL path, this is the URL. Plus a status of OK. This and it returned true.
Can you repeat that, Roger? Your mic cut out.
Let
Just
me
that
connect.
last sentence.
Yeah, let me connect my mic real quick. So when putting in a request, it expects a response back. So we were getting an error. So we had to import HTTP response to actually see something in our browser and for it to work, right? It expected the response. We just put true right now so we don't get an error. But we kind of saw that. Here's the headers. This is the request URL that we put in. The type of request we use was a GET request. It gives us a status code of what type, how was it successful. And it was successful, so it returns 200 status code of OK. We can see the response that we return, and it's true. And essentially, the response is kind of like the body of the request, right? You saw that when working React, when you guys were putting in your request to different APIs. You were essentially waiting for a response to come back from that request, if you recall. And you were using the data that was coming back from that response. Does that sound familiar to you guys? Right? So we have our little method here that as of right now, all it's doing is just returning the response, but it's not actually doing anything pretty cool for us. So let's go ahead and add some functionality here. I'm going to create the area of a square, and it should just be 2 to the power of 2. Right? And now instead of returning true, let's return that area of a square. We run that and we see that it returned 4. Our status here, 200, OK. We can check that the response of it was 4, and it was good to go. Right, so essentially the HTTP response is used because the view function needs to return something back to it. Right, that's what the client understands. And this is going to end up tying into your views, right? So whenever you put in a request to your backend, it's going to put in that request, whether it's a GET request or a PUSH request, and it's going to expect a response back, right? So, for example, if the front end asks for us, hey, I want a Pokemon, we are going to send it in the form of a URL path in a request. We are going to add our information into that response, and our front end is going to take that response and grab the data from it, right? And that's essentially what we kind of end up doing here. We added something to response to send it to our browser, and that's how it's going to grab our data, right? So later on, what you're going to see is we're going to end up grabbing like a Pokemon is equal to like Pokemon.objects.get, right? And it should be able to grab, a Pokemon by an ID. We attach that Pokemon into the response and send it back to the user so they can grab that data. All right, so everything we have been doing is to tie into this, where we can create different objects, classes of our data. We use the serializers to convert it, right? We have different requests, whether it's a GET request, a PUSH request, all right, or a PUT request to update, right? They put in that request to us. We do, some coding here. We grab the object, the query, depending on what that request is asking from us. And then we wrap that bad boy within a response and send it back to them. Do I have any questions so far about the view and how that works? Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and create another path. We have 2 more, and then we will be done. All right, so we did area of a square. The next one is going to be circles. So we can create paths here, right? We have one for squares. We'll have one for circles. We're going to have one for Pokemon. We're going to have one for moves, right? It takes in the path URL, and it's going to expect some type of view. So we're going to create another view here. And it's going to be define circle area view. Taking the request. And let's actually print out what request is giving us to see what request is. Let's do the functionality for actually grabbing this area. So we'll say area of a circle. We are going to import math so we can do the area of a circle, and we'll say math.pi times 2 to the power of 2. All right. And then I want to return an HTTP response. And within here, it should return to me the area of a circle. We create that view. Let's go ahead and add it in here, circle area view. Come back to our server. And let's look at circle. Oh, I see here it's trying to tell me, hey, I'm looking for the URL path that you put in here. These are the only ones that I have. It didn't find a match. And that's because I misspelled my URL path. We put circles there, and we now see the area of that circle. Let's look at the inspect tool. Let's run it again so we can see what it does. We don't want square. We're looking for circles here. Here's the request that was put in. Status 200. I mean, it was okay. We can click it. Oh, here's the response. The headers. It tells us the URL that it had, the type of request method, and the status code. Let's look at our terminal where we printed out the request. And let's run it again. I'm gonna refresh my page. I'm assuming this is what it's printing out here. It's trying to print out the request. The request was a GET request to this URL path. Right? Do I have any questions on the circle area view? All right, this is going to make a little bit more sense to you guys, and we're going to stop it here right afterwards. We should be able to put in our URL the Pokemon and maybe the name of the Pokemon that we want, right? And that one is going to be a prime example of this, right? Let's say we have triangle, and we want to grab the area of a triangle. So this just take us to a URL path called triangle. I want to be able to pass in special parameters in here. I want to give it a height, right? And it should take in height integer. All right, so we can specify what I'm adding within my URL path. Here, this one's integer. We're going to be able to do stuff like string as well to pass in variables into our URL path, right? It should also take in the base, and the base is going to be of type int as well. That's going to be my URL path. And the view is going to be triangle area view. We don't have a define, so it's giving me an issue here. So let's go ahead and create that define triangle area view request. And we're going to do area of a triangle is equal to height times the base divided by 2. Well, where are we going to get this from? Well, our method here, triangle area view, is going to take parameters from the URL path. and we can actually pass it in within this method. I want to grab height, and I want to grab base, right? It's going to have to be matched to whatever we are actually calling it here, right? So it knows I'm grabbing height and base out of the URL path. I'm using those to actually do something with it. And then we have to return an HTTP response. And it should be area of a triangle. We can come back to our URL paths. Where you say triangle / base. What do we want the base to be? We can say 4. Oh, actually, I think this is height. Yeah, it's height. The first one we're passing is height of 4, a base of 2. And we get an issue here.
I think you misspelled
It's-
triangle
yeah.
On your path.
Triangle. Thank you very much. Let's put it in again. You now see that it was able to grab the integers within the URL path in the request, right? It did some functionality with it, and then return. We see here the response was 2. Why is it 2? Oh, it's calling this because the endpoint of it was the endpoint of 2, right? The request is here. Request URL, request method 200. We can check the response. It returned 4.0. Right? So within our project, we will be able to do like Pokemon of name Pikachu. Our views should be able to take in certain parameters that are passed within our URL, right? It's going to use those to query our database. Our database is going to use these queries like Pokemon.object.get, take in the information that's coming from the URL or the request, right? Grab that item for the back, serialize it into a JSON format, and then give it back to us in our response so our front end can use it. Do you guys understand this concept, or do I have any questions? Yes, James.
I think I understand it. Do all the requests have to be on this urls.py? Is that, or do you import them from elsewhere, or you have to put them all here like
That's a good
this?
question. So no, they're not going to be here. What's going to happen later on is we will have, let's go ahead and put the admin back to where it was. We would have something like Pokemon. We have another one like moves, right? And then instead of adding a view here, we will give it a location, which will be something like, you know, the Pokemon app.urls.py, right? Pokemon app.urls, something like that. I don't recall the exact syntax off the top of my head. What's going to happen is it's going to come to the URL patterns. It's going to see the URL that you called. It's going to take the first part. Okay, I see that URL had Pokemon. I found a match, and it's sending me to wherever the URLs is at, right? It's going to go to the Pokemon app, look for the urls.py, and then in that urls.py, we'll have different endpoints specifically just for Pokemon. And those URLs are going to be handling all the different types of views that are only specific to Pokemon, right? Whether it's a GET request, a post, put, or delete, right? It'll take the request that's being given to it. There might be data in the URL path, or there might be data in the response, like we just saw earlier. It grabs that information. It uses that information to query our backend. It grabs the objects that it needs. It's going to then serialize it into a format that our front end can understand. And then it'll send it back to it. Does that answer your question, James?
Yeah, definitely. So the functions that you put on urls.py was just to kind of test, or like the examples to show how it works.
Correct. Right. We wouldn't have views here, right? We would have a specific, as you see already see here, there's a views.py, and And here we will create all these views. Our URL path will reference to actually do that functionality.
Cool.
If I have no more questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now because I can see that we are struggling here. Let's stop.